Chapter 1562. Feng City. After the catastrophe 3 years ago, Feng City had been rebuilt and transformed. It had merged with the 3 surrounding auxiliary cities. Now it was even more prosperous. Its area had become extremely vast. Its scale was not inferior to that of the imperial capitals of the 3 great empires. It was the capital of the Zheng dynasty. At this moment, in the majestic imperial palace, in the quiet courtyard in the bamboo forest, Qin Hao sat on the ground. His aura was surging. Rays of light flowed around his body. They were as sharp as sword qi. They flowed through his fingers and slowly entered the glabella of an elder opposite him. In front of Qin Hao, Elder Meng sat on the ground with his eyes closed. His body was trembling slightly. As the sword intent flowed into his sea of consciousness between his eyebrows, the pressure of the sword intent became stronger and stronger. Gradually, his divine soul felt a tearing pain. Along with this, Old Meng's sword intent became more and more powerful. The terrifying sword intent on his body seemed to be about to condense into a sharp blade. His aura, which could suppress everything, was constantly transforming into a sword sovereign. If Yu Luxin was still alive, he would be deeply surprised to see this scene. The Emperor intent condensed by Elder Meng was no weaker than Yu Luxin, who had seen through the Emperor Dao. In fact, Elder Meng's Emperor intent was even more vast and infinitely close to the Emperor Dao. After a long time, the 2 people who were transmitted sword intent dissipated their auras and cut off the connection. Elder Meng's sword foundation is solid. With this foundation, it's enough to break through the sword Emperor Dao. Qin Hao withdrew his sword finger and said with a smile, 100 years of cultivation is not as good as your Emperor attraction. Thank you, kid. Elder Meng stood up with a trace of excitement. He bowed to Qin Hao in a very solemn manner. Recently, he had been receiving Qin Hao's sword intent transmission. Every time a wisp of sword intent was transmitted into his sea of consciousness, he could see the Dharma body of a mighty figure. Although the figure was vague, it was boundlessly majestic. Every move, look, and stab was completely integrated with the great Tao. It was like the incarnation of the sword Tao. The terrifying power was far beyond the Sword Emperor of the South region. In the past, Elder Meng thought that the sword of the Sword Sect Master represented the pinnacle of the Sword Tao, the Emperor of the Sword. Now, he thought that Shouwuk's uncle was far from it. His sword was not the true great Tao of the sword. Please don't hurt me, I'm afraid my life will be shortened. Qin Hao hurriedly helped Old Meng up. Back then, if it weren't for this righteous old man who had secretly helped him time and time again, Qin Hao might have been killed by Xian Yuan and Yu Lvxian. On the day of the auction, Qin Hao made a promise in his heart. This favor must be repaid. Furthermore, the transmission of Sword Tao could not be considered as repayment. This sword will was comprehended by Shouwuk. It originated from the trial in the illusory palace, and was obtained from Jian Qiong. Although Jian Qiong was an illusory creature of the illusory palace, his sword Tao will was condensed from the obsessions of 7 peak masters. The Tao wills of 7 peak Nirvana realm emperors were extremely powerful. Because of his pride, Shouwuk could not directly share his comprehensions with this old man. He was afraid that it would hurt his self-esteem, so he asked Qin Hao to transmit it on his behalf. If it were not for the fact that he had a particularly good relationship with Qin Hao, First Flawless would not have given these extreme sword arts to Qin Hao. Meanwhile, Qin Hao would only be wasting some of his mental energy at most. This could not be considered as repayment. Keep this elixir well. Take it before you summon the tribulation of the Emperor. Although it won't be of much use, and the tribulation will depend on your own cultivation, it can more or less protect your spiritual soul and strengthen it. As long as your spiritual soul is not scattered by the tribulation of the Great Path, with your solid foundation, you will definitely succeed in entering the Sword Emperor realm. Qin Hao took out a small box and handed it to Elder Meng. Although it was the most common soul-concentrating elixir, it was personally refined by Marshal Uncle Tai Wei. It was the work of Nirvana Dendi. The divine palace had been destroyed, and Uncle Tai Wei's obsession had been refined. Qin Hao did not have many left. If he used one now, it would be one less. This. Ha, old man, how lucky I am to meet a little monster like you. Elder Meng took it without hesitation. He really needed this elixir. He had seen Yu Luxin attract the tribulation of the emperor. The power of the great Tao was too terrifying. Thinking of this, Elder Meng could not help but sigh. He and Yu Luxin were warriors of the southern region in the same era. The Grand Elder of Yu Luxin Palace had been pursuing the Emperor realm all his life. However, when he really entered the Emperor realm, his luck was taken away and his sect was destroyed. On the contrary, Elder Meng did nothing, but he completely met the requirements of a sword emperor. Now, he could attract the tribulation of the Emperor realm at any time. And everything was dominated by Qin Hao's two extremes. One was to help him enter the Emperor realm, the other was to kill him. Big brother, Feng Qianli has returned to the East Continent. At this time, footsteps were heard. Xiaogua and Yi Shuihan stepped into the backyard with ugly expressions. The battle with the Xianyuan clan was imminent, and Feng Qianli dared to run away alone. He left a message, saying that he doesn't want to have anything to do with you in this life. Yi Shuihan said and also secretly glanced at Qin Hao. Because the personal disciples of the 7 peaks of the Divine Palace were all about the same strength, and even compared to them, Feng Qianli was a little stronger. If he wanted to leave, they could not stop him. Unless Sword Emperor Shou Wuk and Empress Xiao Han made a move. But at present these were 2 trump cards, and it was not convenient to expose them. If he doesn't want to have anything to do with me in this life, it depends on whether I want to or not. Qin Hao said casually, let him be. The reason why Feng Qianli stayed was to repay Qin Hao for taking him out of the Divine Palace. Other than that, there was no friendship between the two sides. When the Music Palace was destroyed, Feng Qianli killed the disciples of the Music Palace several times. He played the role of the bad guy on behalf of Qin Hao, so he thought that the favor had been repaid. It's too easy to let him go just like that. Xiaogua was angry. He was just bullying some low-level and ignorant warriors. There were more than 300 people who escaped from the Divine Palace, and any one of them had the ability to beat the disciples of the Music Palace. Feng Qianli just killed a few people to repay the favor of saving his life? It was too easy. It's okay. He's actually scared. Qin Hao said. He had refined the evil fetus, and the evil soul's life was unknown. If he stayed with Qin Hao, he would be hunted down by the evil soul at any time. It was normal for Feng Qianli to be scared. Elder Meng listened in a daze. The more he listened, the more confused he became. There was a sour taste in his heart. Why was the first-class sect of the Southern Territory so vulnerable in the eyes of these juniors? He had many questions about the return of Qin Hao and Shou Wuk, but he didn't ask. And he felt that these little guys seemed to have reached some kind of agreement. They wouldn't mention anything about what had happened outside in the past 3 years. Boy, I'll go back first. When you attack Nanao, just use your sword will. As for the sword sect, don't hold too much hope. We are all warriors of the Southern Territory, and we have no enmity with each other. We really can't kill the Xianyuan family. But if you're in a bad situation, the sword sect will restrain Xianyuan Gaoyan and provide you with help. Elder Meng said. That's enough. Qin Hao replied with a smile. Elder Meng nodded and turned into a beam of light, like a flying sword qi, and shuttled toward the void in the distance. The sword sect is righteous. If we use our relationship with Wuk to force these swordsmen to kill, it's really not benevolent. Besides, we don't need their power. Qin Hao looked at the sword light flying into the void. There was no need for the sword sect to besiege the Xianyuan family. The Knight Luo Palace, the Zheng clan, and Zhang Ye's sword sect were enough. After all, with senior sister Muri, they could win no matter what. They didn't even need Ning Wu and the Li family of Bao. Let's go and see how they're doing. Qin Hao led people out of the bamboo garden and walked toward a forbidden area in the palace. There, 3 generals of Nan'ao were locked up. They were all upper-level Renhuangs. At this moment, they were being ravaged by the 300 disciples of the Divine Palace. Chapter 1563. The Xianyuan clan had controlled the southern Proud Empire for thousands of years. Their bloodline was strong, and there were countless sects within their borders. There was no lack of first-rate forces comparable to the Music Palace. However, there was a limit to the number of powerful figures in the overlord forces. The southern Proud Empire only had Xianyuan Gaoyan and the old antique Xianyuan Wutian. In addition, there were not many elders who had entered the Emperor realm. It was not difficult to divide forces to fight against them. But Renhuangs were different. The southern Proud Empire had more Renhuangs than the state of Zheng in terms of quantity and quality. In the past, the Zheng clan had suffered a great disaster, and their masters were far less than before. Now they had just recovered their title and could not compete with the southern Proud Empire. Even if the small sect under the Night Net Palace joined forces, they would not be as strong as the Renhuangs of the southern Proud Empire. This was a vital force, the mainstay of the overlord forces. In the battle between the 2 overlord forces, the victory of the Renhuangs would largely determine the final outcome of the battle. After all, warriors below the Renhuangs were weak and could not affect the overall situation. There were very few top cultivators, and they could restrain each other. On the contrary, the Renhuangs were the most unstable. Of course, Qin Hao had 300 junior brothers, and they were all Renhuangs. Their arrival made up for the weakness of this level. These 300 people were carefully cultivated by the Divine Palace, and they were giants among men. After 3 years of cultivation in the Divine Palace, the weakest among them, the third-rate disciples, had reached the upper Renhuang realm. The second-rate disciples were basically at the peak of the Renhuang realm. As for the personal disciples, they had comprehended their own rules and were half a step into the Emperor realm. Among them, Shao Han and Shou Wuk had completely stepped into the Emperor realm. Even among the second-rate disciples, there were many who had mastered the rudiments of rules. This force was extremely terrifying. It would be an exaggeration to say that one person could fight 10 people, but when dealing with several opponents of the same level at the same time, even if they could not win, they would not be defeated or killed. If they were gathered together, their power would multiply. Because these 300 people were disciples from all the peaks, together, they could be called a perfect lineup. The disciples of Mizang Peak focused on attacking the Great Path. The disciples of Daozong Peak were unparalleled in sorcery. When Yaoguang Peak played music, who in the same realm could withstand it? Not to mention those from Yun-Yi Peak, who were proficient in array formations. Under the amplification of the array formations, they could increase the overall combat strength of the team. In addition, the Tai Wei Peak disciples at the back were all pill sovereigns and medicine sovereigns. As long as their soul power didn't run out, the Mizar Hall disciples attacking from the front were almost impossible to kill. With such a lineup, which team in Southern Pride would dare to fight alone? However, Qin Hao wouldn't underestimate the Xianyuan clan because of this. The Xianyuan clan had dominated the southern territory for a few thousands of years, so how could it not possess many trump cards? What he wanted was to completely crush them, not let his junior brothers lose their lives. There were only a few of them when they went, but after the battle they had to maintain the same number of people. He would not let these arrogant fellows fail miserably because of personal grudges. Therefore, capturing the 3 Southern Pride generals who had come to celebrate Yu Luxin's birthday was of great use. It was a good opportunity for his junior brothers to practice and familiarize them with the other party's combat strengths and fighting styles in advance to avoid unnecessary casualties during the battle. Now, those three unlucky fellows had been brought back to the Jing dynasty and locked in the forbidden area of the imperial palace. They hadn't slept for half a month. They didn't sleep or rest and tirelessly trained Qin Hao's junior brothers. As long as they were exhausted or tired, the Tai Wei Peak disciples would immediately instill soul power into them to keep the three of them full of physical strength and continue high-intensity training with the disciples of the Divine Palace. It was a kind of pleasure for the disciples of the Divine Palace. For the three Southern Pride generals, it was a fate worse than death. All the way to the forbidden area, there were two Emperor Realm elders of the Zheng clan guarding it. They sat cross-legged on both sides of the door, and behind each of them stood a group of extraordinary guards. Qin Hao nodded to the two elders, and the guards opened the door of the forbidden area and the group walked in. It was a huge sealed room, covered by an array on the outside, and the space inside was far more spacious than standing at the door. The style inside was a bit like a martial arts arena, with countless powerful weapons floating in the air. There were many stands around, and the vast space in the center was for the two sides to fight to their heart's content. If they didn't fight to their heart's content, they could also summon weapons from the void and engage in fierce hand-to-hand combat. Usually, this forbidden secret room was specially provided for the Zheng clan's death servants to practice. But they didn't expect that one day, 3 people from the Xianyuan family would be invited in for a warm visit. At this moment, on the stands around, the disciples of the various peaks were shouting and laughing, as if they were watching a beast fight. This beast was naturally the people of Southern Pride. And their fellow disciples were the heroes of the beast slaying. Senior brother Qin Hao. Senior brother has finally come back to see us. When will you leave for the war of extermination? As Qin Hao and the others stepped in, all the disciples flew down from the stands and gathered around Qin Hao in an instant. They all knew that a great battle was about to take place. This was a war against a family with a great emperor expert. To be honest, without Muri, they definitely wouldn't dare to do so. But now, there was no fear in their emotions. On the contrary, they were quite excited. They were going to exterminate a great emperor family. After this battle, their personal achievements would be remembered. When the later generations talked about it, it would be a great honor to have exterminated a great emperor family. Qin Hao looked at the crowd with a smile. At this moment, in the center of the battlefield, the sounds of fierce fighting could be heard. It was a strong Mizang Hall disciple fighting against 3 Xianyuan family generals alone. Although there were some wounds on his body, he became more courageous as the battle went on. He was already suppressing the 3 generals alone. And this disciple belonged to the 3rd grade, the weakest layer of the 7 peak. Why are you injured? Qin Hao saw that many of his junior brothers' clothes were tattered and their skin had signs of recovery. Clearly, they had been treated by the people of Tai Wei Peak. It was carelessness. However, the Xianyuan family's Tao of gravity is indeed powerful. A youth with an outstanding temperament stood out and said. It was Guxiu, a 2nd-grade disciple of Mizang Hall. Qin Hao's gaze landed on Guxiu and saw that his clothes were also tattered. Cough cough, I did it on purpose. I took the initiative to take the damage and see how strong the 3 of them are. Guxiu covered his wound and said embarrassedly. You still have the face to say that? Wipe off the shoe print on your forehead first. Did you deliberately hit your head on the soles of their feet? How strong is your head? Yi Shuihan glanced at Guxiu. I've been seen through. I'm ashamed. Guxiu shrank into the crowd. He was a 2nd-grade disciple, and naturally didn't dare to challenge the personal disciple Yi Shuihan. Even after leaving the Divine Palace, everyone's sense of class was still very strong. Moreover, Yi Shuihan was Qin Hao's trusted aide. The Xianyuan family's Tao of gravity is not to be underestimated. Unless you are naturally restrained, it is very easy to fall into their Tao. In the past, the uncle masters taught you that to not underestimate your opponent is to respect yourself. Qin Hao said softly. Senior brother is right. We have all seen it. Hundreds of people lowered their heads at the same time. When they mentioned the teachings of the peak masters, they couldn't help but feel a surge of sorrow. Pwah! A mouthful of blood was spilled in the air. Everyone heard a grunt and saw a body in tattered armor crash to the ground. His chest caved in and countless bones were broken. Immediately, another 2 bodies in armor fell to the side of the first person. 3 against 1, the 3 from the Xianyuan family were defeated. Qin Hao, kill us! One of them roared crazily. When he saw the youths in Tai Wei Peak's attire, his angry face was gradually filled with endless fear. Quick, treat his injuries. You must maintain your physical strength. Yes, 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 keep it fresh. It's over, it's over. A guy secretly damaged his spiritual soul. My ability is limited. Senior brother Xuanda, senior brother Tangung, you have to do it personally. A group of Tai Wei Peak disciples shouted anxiously, as if they were a group of unscrupulous doctors who were intoxicated in experiments and were full of worry for their test subjects. Chapter 1564. Shen Xin stood at the entrance of Paramount. She was dressed in luxurious and exquisite clothes, which did not match the coarse smell of powder here. As a result, when people passed by her, they subconsciously avoided her. She tightened her grip on the gift box bag. Finally, she stood in front of Chu Qingwan. The person who used to stand on the stage and wait for her to give her a gift was now standing in front of her. Madam, I like this gift very much. Please thank the young marshal for me. Thank him for his love. Chu Qingwan's expression was gentle and her smile was gentle, but there was a trace of sympathy and pity in her eyes when she looked at Shen Xin. Under her gaze, Shen Xin only wanted to escape, but, is there anything else? Chu Qingwan asked. The elegant smile on her face cracked inch by inch. Shen Xin's words were stuck in her throat. Embarrassment quickly climbed up from the bottom of her heart. Her voice was extremely soft. Miss Chu, can you teach me how to sing? Sing? Chu Qingwan was surprised. Yes. Shen Xin gritted her teeth. Zhonghan said that he wants to hear me sing, so I want to learn from you. Chu Qingwan was even more surprised. Her face was charming and moving, especially under the light. Her eyes moved and were full of charm. His eyes were filled with surprise, pity, sarcasm. Shen Xin's fingers trembled slightly. Her small face was pale, and her fingertips were cold. Even her body, which was wrapped in fur, quickly turned cold. All right, I'll teach you if you want to learn. What does Madam want to learn? The night was long. Shen Xin and Chu Qingwan walked and spoke on the quiet and empty stage. Under the light, they practiced over and over again. Their voices came from the empty space. Long and quiet, her voice was hoarse, and layers of cold sweat broke out on her body. Shen Xin's small face became paler and paler, as white as paper. Thinking about the past, I still feel regret. When I left, the flowers were like brocade. Today, the willow on the roof, bang, there was a loud sound. Chu Qingwan came back to her senses and looked back. She saw Shen Xin, who had fallen on the stage. Madam! She was shocked. Shen Xin's body was curled up on the table like a shrimp, and her thin body couldn't stop trembling. Madam, what's wrong? Chu Qingwan wanted to reach out to support her, but Shen Xin gritted her teeth and waved her hand. I'm fine. She could endure the pain for a while and it would pass. Chu Qingwan was shocked by the bone-piercing pain and the dense sweat on her forehead. She wanted to call for help, but Chu Qingwan held her back tightly. No need to call for help. This is an old problem of mine. After an unknown period of time, Shen Xin's body finally stopped trembling and her complexion improved slightly. Madam, is this stomach cancer? Chu Qingwan suddenly asked. ZT0G Shen Xin looked up. Chu Qingwan continued, "My younger sister also passed away because of stomach cancer." Shen Xin felt bitter. The chances of curing stomach cancer were almost zero. She nodded. Chu Qingwan reached out to help her up, her expression complicated. "Does the young commander know?" "I don't know." Shen Xin smiled. Chu Qingwan pursed her lips. She wanted to say something, but she didn't know how to start. Yesterday, she had naturally seen the young commander's disgust and dislike of Shen Xin. If he knew about Shen Xin's body, would he still treat her like this? Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. After all, Shen Xin had done many evil things. In a daze, she heard Shen Xin say again, "I ask Miss Chu to help me hide this matter. I don't want him to know." "Miss Chu, many thanks." Faced with such a pair of pleading eyes, Chu Qingwan finally nodded. "Let's continue, Miss Chu." Shen Xin stood up. She still remembered Xiao Zhonghan's request. She still wanted to learn how to sing when her body was in such a condition. Chu Qingwan's voice faltered. "Why do you have to do this?" Chu Qingwan had personally seen how painful it was for someone with late-stage stomach cancer to be in pain. It was also because she had seen it that she didn't understand why Shen Xin was so insistent. Wasn't it good to tell Xiao Zhonghan? "He likes it." One sentence, 3 words. He likes it. Because of such a laughable and lamentable reason, Shen Xin supported her seriously ill body to learn how to sing on a cold winter night in such a place. Chu Qingwan's eyelashes moved slightly. She could see that Shen Xin didn't have much time left. This woman. Chapter 1565. The day had finally arrived. Countless void warships took off from various cities of the Zheng dynasty, carrying elite soldiers and generals. They formed a terrifying fleet and headed toward the southern Proud Empire. Looking down from the clouds, the fleet was densely packed and vast. In addition, figures with tyrannical auras drove their magic weapons and turned into streams of light that pierced through the void, following the warships. Their speed was even faster than the void warships that were burning primordial crystal stones. Human sovereign figures constantly rose from the Jing dynasty's territory and the Night Luo Palace's territory to form a huge army of human sovereigns. Their imposing manner made the world tremble. On the ground, there were also huge war beasts galloping. Countless low-level martialists followed behind the war beasts and advanced on foot like an endless tide. They rushed toward the southern Proud Empire from different routes, wanting to drown the entire southern Proud Empire. After the destruction of the Joy Palace, the southern region had only been peaceful for half a month. Today, a terrifying storm was stirred up again and headed straight for the Xianyuan family. The aura of countless powerhouses gathered together was extremely terrifying. It could be clearly felt from tens of thousands of miles away. The moment the Zheng dynasty's entire army attacked, countless martialists in the southern region were alarmed. They got up from various places and rushed toward the location of the energy fluctuation. Soon, they witnessed the huge army of the Zheng dynasty and were instantly terrified. The martialists who rushed over from various places did not dare to get too close, but they also followed the Zheng dynasty's army from afar. They all wanted to see the final outcome of this battle with their own eyes. After all, the southern region had never had a conflict between the overlord forces for thousands of years. This day was destined to be recorded in the annals of history. They all wanted to be witnesses to history. The figures of the southern region's martialists continued to gather. The weak ones were saints, the strong ones were human sovereigns, and there were even half-step monarch-level existences. Unknowingly, they had also gathered together and formed a huge army of cultivators that followed the Zheng dynasty's fleet from afar. The number of martialists who came to watch the battle was still increasing. What surprised countless people was that when the Zheng dynasty's vanguard rushed into the southern Proud Empire's stronghold, there were not many troops left to guard the stronghold. They only put up a little resistance, and a few lower-level Yuan venerates died before falling into the hands of the Zheng dynasty's vanguard. The Southern Proud Empire actually did not deploy a strong military force in the stronghold. This was too unusual. One had to know that on the day the music palace was destroyed, Xianyuan Gaoyan had received news that Qin Hao had once again appeared in the southern region. How could Xianyuan Gaoyan not be on guard when the other party destroyed the music palace and killed the music palace's grand elder and palace master? In this peaceful half a month, there were rumors in the outside world that the Southern Proud Empire was ready to go to war with Qin Hao. However, the border fortress had fallen in an instant and the Xianyuan family hadn't deployed too many troops. Even the few lower-level Yuan venerates that had died weren't from the Xianyuan family. Why was this? Did Xianyuan Gaoyan give up on resisting? The people of the southern region were puzzled. Qin Hao also had a trace of doubt in his heart. However, that was not important. The purpose of his troops was to destroy the entire Xianyuan family and attack the capital city in one fell swoop. A fortress at the border was nothing in his eyes. The Zheng dynasty's army marched straight in, sweeping through the entire southern Pride territory from the strongholds and the waterways. Everywhere they passed, there was basically no resistance. Most of them chose to surrender. Occasionally, some stubborn ones would jump out, but they would be killed on the spot. In 3 days, the Zheng dynasty's vanguard arrived at the auxiliary city gate of the Southern Proud Empire's capital. Not far behind the auxiliary city was the capital city of the Southern Proud Empire. However, in this auxiliary city called Sangshuan City, there was an acquaintance of Qin Hao's, Xianyuan Wuji. Xianyuan Wuji's father was the city lord of Sangshuan City. This was the home of a branch of his family. If you want to pass through Sangshuan City, you'll have to step over my dead body first. A mighty roar shook the heavens and earth. In front of the city gate of Sangshuan City, a middle-aged man covered in blood and whose armor was severely damaged glared at the countless Zheng dynasty martialists in the void. Golden yuan qi surged on the middle-aged man's body. The intense light symbolized his cultivation base as an upper-level human ruler. At the moment, blood was flowing continuously from under the middle-aged man's helmet. The webbing between his thumb and index finger had split open, and many corpses were lying on the ground below. These corpses belonged to the elders of the Sangshuan City branch. Almost all of the higher-ups of the Sangshuan City branch had been wiped out. There was no one left who could fight side by side with him, the city lord. Behind him, there were still many soldiers standing on top of the city wall. However, those young soldiers had low cultivation levels. Facing the ferocious army of the Zheng dynasty, they posed no threat at all. Perhaps the other party only needed a low-level Renhuang to slaughter all the soldiers in the city in an instant. Xianyuan Yunqing himself was already an arrow at the end of its flight and was seriously injured. However, there were only 3 people who had fought with him just now. 3 young martialists with extraordinary auras, all of whom were peak Renhuang. The Zheng dynasty had only used the strength of 3 people to easily kill all of the higher-ups of the Sangshuan City branch. In one move, every clan elder who died was killed by the other party in one move. It was swift and vicious. You're a good city lord and I admire you. Unfortunately, we won't hold back. No one from the Xianyuan clan will be left alive. Gu Xiu's eyes were cold, and his voice was bone-chilling. He slowly raised his hand, and a source spirit battle seal condensed in his palm. It flickered with a terrifying light of laws. Although the law aura wasn't too strong, and he had probably just comprehended it not long ago, its power was enough to kill the city lord of the Sangshuan City. Father! Just as Gu Xiu was about to act, a figure suddenly flew out from the city. He let out a cry as he hovered beside the city lord of Sangshuan City and used his remaining arm to grab at the air. A dragon bone phantom claw shot out from his palm and slashed towards Gu Xiu. The dragon bone phantom claw flew forward, shaking the space. Clearly, the method of using soul power was extremely exquisite. Unfortunately, its power was only at the Yuan Venerate level. Guxiu couldn't even be bothered to deal with it. He allowed the attack to land on his body, but it didn't even leave a mark on his clothes. Guxiu's contemptuous gaze landed on the one-armed youth. He raised his hand and the law battle seal whizzed out and landed on the one-armed youth's head. Wuji, get out of the way! Xianyuan Yunqing was unafraid of death. However, at this moment, he panicked. He threw away his sword and charged at Xianyuan Wuji. Using his backbone as a father, he supported the rule battle seal that was smashing towards him from behind. Boom! Crack! The sound of bones shattering echoed as the two figures were smashed to the ground and rolled far away. Although the city lord of the Tsangshuan city had withstood most of the power of Guxiu's law battle seal, there was still some power that passed through his body and blasted into Xianyuan Wuji's chest. When he fell, Xianyuan Wuji felt as if his limbs and bones were about to shatter and his soul was about to be annihilated by the law battle seal. Qin Hao. I want to see Qin Hao. Xianyuan Wuji exerted his full strength as he uttered a weak shout while his body twitched crazily. You don't have the right, Guxiu said ruthlessly. Chapter 1566. Xianyuan Wuji's eyes were filled with endless sorrow when he heard Guxiu's words. He still remembered many years ago when Shao Yi held the emperor martial competition in the northern border to find a husband for Shao Han. He and Qin Hao had once fought on the same stage and shone brightly on the same stage. At that time, he had witnessed Qin Hao's unparalleled talent and his future was limitless. When they met again, Xianyuan Wuji had completely proven his eyesight. However, Xianyuan Wuji had already lost the qualifications to compete with Qin Hao on that day in Golden Light City. He could only watch from afar as Qin Hao fought with other outstanding figures. Now, he didn't even have the qualifications to meet Qin Hao. Xianyuan Wuji's gaze slowly shifted towards Xianyuan Yunqing. As he looked at his father who was heavily injured and riddled with scars, his sorrowful expression was gradually replaced by despair. The battle seal had fallen, and his father's spirit had been suppressed by the rules and Tao will. He couldn't even move a finger and didn't need to fight anymore. The people of Tsangshuan City weren't afraid of death. However, there were still many children from the branch families in the city. Those children were innocent and their souls were clean. They were innocent. Plop! Tears streamed down Xianyuan Wuji's face as he knelt on the ground. He looked at his father who was heavily injured and on the verge of death. His eyes were extremely weak as he choked with sobs. Your son is useless. Foolish, foolish child. Xianyuan Yunqing's body fell to the ground. The armor on his back had shattered, revealing a tragic sight of flesh and blood. He forced out a smile and struggled to raise his arm. He tried his best to reach his son's face with his palm, trying to wipe away the tears at the corner of his eyes. However, his injuries were too serious. His broken arm was only halfway raised when he fell heavily to the ground. Xianyuan Yunqing's face was also filled with despair. However, his despair wasn't because he had lost the battle and his clansmen were about to be slaughtered. It was more like the coldness of being abandoned. His branch family had guarded Tsangshuan City for generations and guarded the gates of the capital for Xianyuan Gaoyan. They were loyal and devoted. However, Xianyuan Gaoyan had moved the entire empire's army into the capital ahead of time. As a result, the entire city's defenses were empty, allowing the Zheng army to march straight in and fight their way here. He didn't understand why Xianyuan Gaoyan had done this. If the emperor wanted to fight the final battle with the great Zheng in the imperial city, why didn't he order the Tsangshuan city's branch clan members to go with him? All the branches of the Xianyuan royal family had been drawn into the imperial city, leaving only them outside. Had he been abandoned? The Tsangshuan city faction had become Xianyuan Gaoyan's abandoned pawn. Xianyuan Yunqing didn't believe it at first. He was still holding on to the illusion that the emperor was deliberately feigning weakness. If the enemy really attacked here, the emperor would suddenly dispatch troops from the imperial city, and the entire army would come pressing down to resolve the crisis in Songshuan City. This was a technique used to lure the enemy deep into the enemy's territory, and it was very normal to use it on the battlefield. But now, no reinforcements had appeared. Xianyuan Gaoyan's coldness shattered Xianyuan Yunqing's fantasies and made him understand just how foolish and laughable it was for him to fight so hard. I ordered my clansmen to send you away. Why did you come back? My son, I've never been disappointed in you. Even if others say that you're degenerate, don't want to make progress, and don't deserve to be a descendant of the Xianyuan emperor, in my eyes, it's the best that you can live according to your own wishes. A teardrop that had been held back for too long finally flowed down from the corner of Xianyuan Yunqing's eyes. 8 years. Ever since Xianyuan Wuji returned from the northern border, he had been depressed for 8 years, enduring the ridicule and disdain of others for 8 years. Although he had scolded and reprimanded his son before, asking why he couldn't take the blow. But at this moment, Xianyuan Yunqing only hoped that Xianyuan Wuji could go far away and live on. Your son is willing to fight to the death with father. Xianyuan Wuji pressed his head against the ground. Leave? Where else could he go? His clansmen had drugged him when he wasn't paying attention and wanted to send him to the imperial city to be protected by Xianyuan Gaoyan. But was Xianyuan Wuji really that stupid? He knew better than anyone else. Nan Ao would die in this battle, and Qin Hao wouldn't give up until the Xianyuan royal family was destroyed. Instead of begging Xianyuan Gaoyan, it was better to fight to the death with his father. Moreover, Xianyuan Gaoyan couldn't even protect himself, so why would he care about the life of a branch disciple? Okay, I'll take care of you even in hell. Xianyuan Yunqing finally used all his strength to move some distance away and grab Xianyuan Wuji's hand. If there's a next life, I'll still be your son. Xianyuan Wuji raised his head and clasped his father's hand. Gu Xiu shook his head. Save the rest for when you have tea with the king of hell. They had wasted too much time. The army had encountered almost no resistance on their way here. Songshuan City could be considered as a true resistance, and it was Gu Xiu's turn to be in charge of taking down the city. In the past, it had always been the other disciples who had swept through the cities, but when it came to Gu Xiu, he encountered obstacles. This made him feel somewhat displeased. Human Emperor light bloomed and wisps of powerful soul power condensed into a dazzling battle seal in Gu Xiu's palm. The terrifying light of laws lingered on the battle seal. Although Gu Xiu was unhappy, the relationship between father and son was still worthy of respect. There won't be any pain. Close your eyes and everything will pass. As Gu Xiu spoke, an extremely turbulent pressure erupted from the battle seal in his palm. It constantly expanded and floated in the air like a towering mountain. Its imposing manner shook Songshuan City. On the city walls, thousands of soldiers were originally very angry, but the moment the other party revealed his cultivation, their anger was instantly replaced by fear. They all knew that the extraordinary young man with the battle seal was going to destroy the entire city with one strike, leaving no survivors. Gu Xiu. A voice came from the rear of the Zheng army. Then, a figure in snow-white clothes streaked across the void, arriving at an extremely fast speed and blocking Gu Xiu's path. This person's temperament was otherworldly and was even more outstanding than Gu Xiu's. Senior brother Su Jin. Gu Xiu was taken aback and hurriedly dispersed his soul power. The mountainous battle seal that had suppressed the void suddenly disappeared. Return to the team, your mission is complete. Su Jin said softly. Yes, senior brother Su. Although Gu Xiu didn't understand, he obeyed the order and turned to leave with the 2 Divine Palace disciples, flying towards the center of the Zheng fleet. Xianyuan Wuji. Su Jin floated in the air, looking down at a one-armed young man below. Take your clan and leave. Find a secluded place to live in seclusion. After Su Jin finished speaking, without waiting for the other party's response, his body flickered and he silently disappeared. His speed was so fast that no one could catch the direction of his aura. Then, one after another, huge void warships flew over Xianyuan Wuji's head, rumbling endlessly. It was an extremely spectacular sight. They abandoned Songshuan City, and all rushed towards Nan-Ao Imperial City. An incomparably terrifying pressure whizzed over the top of their heads, like an endless dark cloud. When the Zheng army disappeared, all the soldiers and people in the city were paralyzed with fear. "Thank you," Xianyuan Wuji muttered as he looked at the departing fleet. He knew that the extraordinary young man in white must have been ordered by Qin Hao to bypass Songshuan City. Qin Hao came to destroy the entire Xianyuan clan, but in the end, he mercifully let go of the Songshuan City branch. Besides expressing his gratitude, Xianyuan Wuji didn't know how to express his gratitude to such an extreme person who would seek revenge 100 times over for sparing their lives. However, as the warships above his head continued to fly into the distance, the broad palm that tightly held Xianyuan Wuji was finally willing to let go. Xianyuan Yunqing died with a smile on his face. Buzz buzz buzz. Powerful waves of air squeezed open space, as if cutting open a path. The fleet formation moved forward at a uniform speed, getting closer and closer to Nan-Ao Imperial City. At the same time, the monstrous murderous aura that filled the void grew stronger and stronger. In the center of the countless warships, there was a giant warship that seemed to be made of purple rock and glowed with purple light. The size of this warship was far greater than that of its kind and looked indestructible. It was the carriage of the commander of the army. At this moment, Qin Hao was standing at the bow of the warship. No matter how fierce the wind was, it couldn't blow a single strand of his hair. Around him, experts were as numerous as clouds, and they were all emperor expert. "Why did you let Xianyuan Wuji go?" Jing Qinqi asked in a soft voice. "Why can't I give a person who has no desires and who is indifferent to the world a chance to stay away from disputes?" Qin Hao looked at Jing Qinqi with a smile. According to Denda's character in his previous life, he would never be soft-hearted. No one from the Xianyuan family could leave alive. However, after his rebirth, Qin Hao's state of mind had changed slightly. Last time at the auction in Golden Light City, he could also see that Xianyuan Wuji had changed a lot. If Xianyuan Wuji only wanted to give the children of the clan a chance to survive, such a small request wasn't too much. After all, Xianyuan Wuji knew Qin Hao's temper very well. He could give them a chance to live. He also needed to intimidate them. Therefore, he couldn't leave a single expert in Songshuan City alive. He had to let the children of the clan remember today's disaster in their hearts, engrave it into their bones and souls, and crush them. He had to let them firmly remember that there was an expert that they couldn't offend. Qinqi, learn the power of a ruler well. A mighty old man sitting next to Qin Hao said. He was the ancestor of the Zheng clan, and his cultivation was at the 4th layer of the Emperor realm. Jing Qinqi smiled and said, "But even if we let them go, I'm afraid that the people of the Songshuan City branch will live in the bullying of others for the rest of their lives." The entire Xianyuan family had been wiped out, and the overlord force of a generation had collapsed. The more glorious it was, the more miserable it was after it fell. In the past, the cultivators of the southern region were all afraid of the Xianyuan family and kept a respectful distance. After losing Xianyuan Gaoyan, a great emperor expert, the experts of Xianyuan Wuji's clan were all gone, and the rest were a group of children with weak cultivation. Any slightly stronger clan could bully and humiliate them. Then it's not my problem. Qin Hao's eyes were very calm. He had let Xianyuan Wuji live. If the descendants of the clan were bullied in the future, Xianyuan Wuji could only blame himself for being useless. After Qin Hao let them go, would he have to be kind and send people to protect them? He wasn't a philanthropist. He had 2 lifetimes of deep hatred with the Xianyuan family. In his previous life, Qin Hao's body was destroyed and he died in the burial valley. Xianyuan Wutian was one of the 10 main culprits. In this life, Xiao Han was kidnapped, and Xianyuan Wuying died 100 times to vent his hatred. He didn't kill Xianyuan Wuji as well because he was compassionate. Chapter 1567. The army bypassed Songshuan City and advanced towards the Xianyuan imperial capital. The two cities were not far apart, and the fleet soon passed through an area where they could already see the shadow of the imperial capital from above. Qin Hao stood up from his seat and walked to the front of the ship. Even from afar, he could feel the domineering and majestic aura of the Xianyuan imperial capital from its enormous shadow. As they got closer, the scene in front of them became clearer and more shocking. A huge royal city stood in front of them. It was vast and boundless, radiant with golden qi, and the terrain swallowed everything in all directions like a giant beast entrenched on the ground. It was extremely intimidating. The city walls made of boulders towered dozens of feet high, and the walls glowed with a metallic luster, looking extremely sturdy. Inside the city, there were many magnificent palaces, noble and imposing, like the palace of the god. At each of the 4 corners of the city stood a giant pillar that reached the sky. Dragons, phoenixes, black tortoises, divine beasts, white tigers, and many other rare ancient beasts were carved on the pillars. They were vivid and lifelike, exuding the aura of powerful divine beasts. They gave off a very dangerous feeling. Clearly, these things were not decorations, but possessed extremely terrifying destructive power. The 4 towering pillars pierced through the clouds like 4 gigantic arms that supported the Xianyuan imperial family. The emperor's aura suppressed the entire area. However, these weren't the most dazzling. At the absolute center of the royal capital, there was a gigantic golden divine hall. This divine hall was like a city within a city. It floated in the air and was enveloped by terrifying emperor light, exuding a sense of majesty and holiness. It was like a place where gods existed. From the city walls to the 4 giant pillars, including all the buildings in the city, and the temple suspended in the air, the huge building complex was made of pure gold. It demonstrated the supreme authority of the Xianyuan imperial family, which had stood in the southern region for thousands of years, and had been worshipped by generations of descendants. What powerful fluctuations of power! Those 4 pillars are very dangerous and a little troublesome. One by one, the void warships drew closer and lined up in a straight line, facing off against the majestic imperial city in front of them from a distance. In an instant, endless murderous qi filled every corner of the space. The killing intent was so strong that it seemed to push out space, making one's heart feel heavy and oppressive. When they saw the true appearance of Xianyuan Imperial City, the Uni-Peak disciples who were practicing formations on the main ship couldn't help but tremble, their faces gradually contorting. Inside the Xianyuan Imperial City, the power of the formation was extremely strong. Judging from the formation light released, it had already exceeded the ability of the disciples of the Uni-Peak to break it. Perhaps its power was far from comparable to the barrier of the Divine Palace, but it was not something that they could easily break. If we can't suppress them with our high-end combat power, no matter how many people we have, we can only stop here. Great Ancestor Jing stood up and looked at the city wall that was made of pure gold. Traces of formation energy wandered on the wall, and his expression turned ugly. The defense of this kind of thing was extremely terrifying. When the array power was connected and covered the entire city wall, low-level martial artists would not even have the chance to get close. Once they got a little closer, they would be torn apart on the spot by the array power, not to mention carrying a ladder to attack the city. Anyone below the Renhuang Plain who is within 100 steps of the Renhuang Plain must die. At this time, a voice came from behind the crowd. The disciples of the Divine Palace looked back with respectful faces and stepped aside. Master. Qin Hao spoke softly. The person who came was Muri. However, he could not openly address her as senior sister, so as not to scare the weak Emperor Yuan of the Jing clan and the Knight Luo Palace to death. The array source of this city wall is actually in the floating temple, including the defense of the entire city. It has nothing to do with the 4 array pillars. Muri was wearing a plain white robe. Accompanied by Yininghong and Granny Ying, she walked over. Her face was covered by a veil, and no one could see her true appearance. As a disciple of the Migres Palace, she was naturally like Qin Hao. She had cultivated in the 7 peaks of the Divine Palace. With 1,700 years of cultivation, her foundation, and the vast Dili, including her ability in formations, she was far beyond Qin Hao's reach. Greetings, Supreme Divinity. Great Ancestor Jing and all the peak Renhuangs in the clan bowed at the same time. Their attitude was extremely respectful. This woman returned with Qin Hao. Although her specific identity was unknown, everyone vaguely guessed that she came from the Divine Palace, the supreme martial house of the continent that had produced a god-level master. As for how high the woman's status in the Divine Palace was, no one could guess. Since Qin Hao called her master, she should be at least an elder. She could also be a deacon of the Divine Palace. Even so, everyone was in fear and trepidation. In front of Muri, the great ancestor of the Zheng clan spoke carefully for fear that his voice would displease the supreme divinity. Not to mention him, even the palace master of the Knight Luo Palace and the 9-star Great Emperor treated the supreme divinity as their ancestor. Yininghong personally poured tea, poured water, and ate food. Who would have thought that the leader of the overlord force of the southern region would serve others like a maid? Master, is there a way to directly destroy the array source? Qin Hao asked. Those below the Renhuang realm, who were within 100 steps, would die. It was indeed a little tricky. No matter how confident Qin Hao was, it was impossible for him to charge into the city with less than 1,000 Renhuangs from the Zheng clan and the Knight Luo Palace and confront the army of the Xianyuan family head-on. Moreover, senior sister only said that those below the Renhuang realm who were within 100 steps would die. Then, once they entered the city, even those above the Renhuang realm would be weakened. The Xianyuan family's protective array had been in operation for countless years. This tortoise shell was indeed very strong. If senior sister wasn't here. You doubt my ability? Even if it's 10 or 20 times stronger, it's no different from paper in front of me. Muri stared at Qin Hao. Was this guy's brain muddled? Pfft. Xiaohan laughed out loud. Senior sister was the flawless great emperor. In the world, there was probably no array in the outside world that could withstand her crushing with one finger. I was a little anxious just now. Qin Hao smiled embarrassedly as he looked at his senior sister. He looked at the wrinkles that extended from the corners of her eyes, that were like numerous withered vines that were climbing up. Her originally tall and graceful figure had become hunched in a short period of half a month, and he couldn't help but feel uncomfortable in his heart. Senior sister used to be a beauty. I'm afraid there's only one layer of this array. There should be arrays within arrays in the city. You all should be careful. I won't make a move unless it's absolutely necessary. Muri turned around and slowly walked back to the cabin with Yininghong's help. There was a big battle in front of them, but it was also a test. As a disciple of the Divine Palace, they were not afraid of any test from the outside world. However, once the battle began, it would be fierce and chaotic. Muri couldn't take care of everyone. If they weren't careful, the disciples of the Divine Palace would be at risk of dying. Phew! Qin Hao let out a long sigh of relief. He stepped on the bow of the ship and faced the vast imperial city. He gathered his internal strength and shouted, Xianyuan Gaoyan! Xianyuan Gaoyan! Xianyuan Gaoyan! Xianyuan Gaoyan! His shout rushed into the imperial city, shaking it back and forth. However, the city was still calm. Standing in the void, there was no one to be seen. It was as if the city was empty. However, under the surface of this empty shell, the Zheng army could feel a strong sense of danger. At this moment, countless soldiers standing on the warships clenched their weapons. Their palms were sweating. "How dare you call me by my name, little brat from the wilderness of western Liang?" A response came from the city. This voice was so majestic that it made the world tremble. Xianyuan Gaoyan was a 9-star imperial lord, a cultivator in the first realm of the imperial path, and a great emperor. In his eyes, Qin Hao was not qualified to talk to him, let alone call him by his name. Was Qin Hao qualified to call him by his name? "You're about to die, but you're still putting on airs." A disciple of the divine palace muttered with disdain. "Shut up. He's a great emperor," Gu Dai said in a low voice. Guqi said in a low voice. "Even if they were enemies, a great emperor should be respected. Old fogey of the Zheng clan, 3 years ago, this emperor gave the Myriad Cultivator Alliance a way out, yet you defeated soldiers are not grateful at all. Today, you dare to take the initiative to attack me. I gave up the fortress and let you enter, not because I'm afraid of you, but because I don't want both sides to suffer losses. It's not too late to retreat now. We're all forces of the southern region, so I won't pursue this matter. In the future, we'll all live in peace and mind our own business." Xianyuan Gaoyan's voice seemed to come from all directions in the city, making it impossible to pinpoint his location. Great Ancestor Jing swallowed his saliva. Normally, he would never have dared to bring people here. However, today's battle was not something he could control. At present, he was just a foil. The real main force was the group of lawless youths that Qin Hao had brought. At this moment, Great Ancestor Zheng also glanced at Qin Hao. The person who should respond was not him. If Xianyuan Gaoyan rushed over later, he would be the first to settle the score. Live in peace? Why didn't Xianyuan Wuying say live in peace when he kidnapped you? Why didn't you say live in peace when you attacked Feng City and wanted to swallow the Wan Cultivator Alliance? Qin Hao sneered. Are you trying to be reasonable now? 3 years ago, Xianyuan Wuying had kidnapped Xiao Han. In order to force out the scarlet arrow from her body, he had ignored the serious injury to her spirit and almost turned Xiao Han into a soulless shell. You call that live in peace and mind our own business? Barbaric brat, who gave you the right to talk nonsense with me? Yininghong, is this how you discipline your disciples? An angry roar sounded in the void. In Xianyuan Gaoyan's view, Qin Hao only dared to behave so atrociously because of the Knight Luo Palace's support. However, Yininghong did not give the slightest response. Opening the border fortress is the first step of my tolerance. Giving up Tsangshuan City and sacrificing the lives of all the Xianyuan clan members of the Tsangshuan branch for you to vent your resentment is the second step of my benevolence. Of course, my tolerance is only limited to these 2 chances. The robbery of Xiao Han was indeed Xianyuan Wuying's fault. What he did wasn't wrong, but his mistake was that he didn't do it cleanly. He didn't get the treasure in time, which led to wave after wave of trouble. However, he had already made the entire Tsangshuan City branch pay for Xiao Han's life. Wasn't that enough? You can still stand quietly and listen to me, and not attack when you see me. This is already my 3rd kindness. Scram, go back to where you came from. Otherwise, even Yininghong won't be able to save you. Yuan crystal cannons. Qin Hao roared. Xianyuan Gaoyan wasn't done yet. He wasn't here to listen to nonsense today. Buzz, buzz. Dazzling halos flickered in the air, and the front of each warship lit up. When countless warships surged with blazing light at the same time, the power of the spiritual qi fluctuations caused the entire sky to shake. Qin Hao only needed to raise his arm, and in an instant, the countless cannons with enormous energy would pour into the city. Ha ha ha, as expected. You won't give up until you hit a wall. Fine, this emperor will bestow upon you a magnificent curtain call. A majestic figure of an emperor rose into the air from the palace in the city and hovered above the 9 heavens. The moment Xianyuan Gaoyan appeared, the brilliance of the entire southern region seemed to be drowned out by the emperor light he emitted. Chapter 1568. Emperor light shone brightly as it surrounded his body. Xianyuan Gaoyan became the focus of everyone's attention. It was as if the great Tao was trembling under his feet. He stood alone in the air, facing off against the entire Jing army. His aura was stronger than that of hundreds of thousands of people. Countless Yuan crystal cannons on the battleships seemed to be intimidated by Xianyuan Gaoyan's aura and didn't dare to fire. Everyone felt that once the cannons were fired, they would be stuck in the cannons. His aura was extremely domineering. Rumble! Space shook violently as the Xianyuan royal family's battleships rose from the city. They were so densely packed that they covered the sky. The huge fleet was connected together, forming a sturdy fortress in the sky, blocking the Zheng army's front. They were well equipped and had a large number of people, suppressing the Zheng army. Countless royal family war eagle riders flew between the battleship. They flapped their wings and filled Qin Hao's vision. This was Xianyuan Gaoyan's Air Cavalry Legion. Behind the Air Cavalry Legion, several square formations with bright armor appeared at the same time. The Saint Army, the Venerable Realm Battle Formation, and the Human Sovereign Realm Army were all present. Each of them was formed by the Xianyuan royal family's experts. They all had the same bloodline. Other than that, there were 2 other cultivator legions that seemed messy. They were arranged on the 2 sides of the royal family's army. Although their formation wasn't as dazzling as the Xianyuan royal family's army, they had more people. There were venerables, human sovereigns, and half-step great emperors. Their cultivation was uneven and varied. Even though they were in square formations, they were in groups of 3 to 5. There was a clear gap between them. These cultivators were the various sect forces of the Southern Proud Empire. Now that the overlord forces were at war, they couldn't escape the fate of being involved. Any sect with a little bit of fame had to participate in the war and work for the Xianyuan family. After all, there was a big difference between a dynasty and a sect. For example, the Knight Luo Palace. The small sect under the Knight Luo Palace could choose not to participate. Yininghong wouldn't force them. But the Xianyuan family was different. They were a dynasty. Everything under the emperor's feet was the emperor's territory. No one dared to disobey the emperor's orders. Crash! As the main forces of the various legions appeared, the originally empty city walls were filled with soldiers and spears. Countless arrows and crossbows shot out, flickering with sharp light as they aimed at the great Jing fleet in the air. Behind the city wall, huge catapults were waiting to be launched. They were filled with huge rocks that had been reinforced by the formation, and they were flashing with terrifying elemental powers of lightning, fire, ice, and snow. Along with the bone-chilling tightening of the ropes, the giant rocks that contained the power of fire, ice, and lightning would rain down on the Zheng dynasty's fleet. However, what truly boosted the morale of the Xianyuan imperial family was yet to come. The sound of a flute rang out, and a profound rhythm spread out from the space. The ground began to tremble, and countless demonic beasts rushed over from afar. They surrounded the city walls and built a thick wall of flesh and blood. The war elephant, giant wolf, berserk lion, and the 3-headed giant python all stared at the front with bloodthirsty eyes, watching as the great Zheng's army gradually approached the front line. The Zheng dynasty's troops that were traveling on foot were generally weaker in terms of cultivation, so they were naturally not as fast as the Void Fleet. However, there were also demonic beasts and a small number of sea beasts among them. Spirit Beast Sect, Beast Tamers. The Zheng dynasty's ancestors stared at the horde of beasts below. The city wall had been reinforced by the formation, and it was already difficult to break through. The Spirit Beast Sect had even driven the Beast Tide to assist the Xianyuan family. One could imagine how tragic this battle would be. It was probably the first time in the history of the southern region, and who knew how many myriad Cultivator Alliance cultivators would die. At the very least, the Xianyuan family had the upper hand in terms of equipment, military appearance, and even battle prowess and aura. On the other hand, the Jing dynasty's side was too weak. The Xianyuan family was indeed an old overlord of the southern region, and their foundation was terrifyingly strong. I don't know why you suddenly came back. What kind of magic potion did you feed that demonic woman, Yi Ninghong, to make her use all the power of her sect and the declining Jing clan to invade the prestige of the Xianyuan imperial family? Xianyuan Gaoyan shouted angrily. This battle would be a battle to the death. It would only end when one of the overlords fell. Xianyuan Gaoyan and Yi Ninghong were both 9-star sovereign lords. Even if one of them killed the other, they would have to use all their strength, and they would suffer immeasurable injuries. This wasn't a price that Xianyuan Gaoyan was willing to pay. Once his body was damaged, even if he killed Yi Ninghong, it would create an opportunity for the other overlords. The consequences would be a disaster. That was why Xianyuan Gaoyan didn't put all his eggs in one basket when he destroyed the Myriad Cultivator Alliance. He and Yi Ninghong tacitly chose to stay out of it. Nothing could happen to a 9-star sovereign lord. But today, he had to fight even if he didn't want to. Qin Hao had forced him into a corner. Originally, I didn't want to become enemies with Yi Ninghong, but since I'm going to fight, I won't fight without preparation. Today you've forced me to go too far. You took the initiative to stick your head out in front of the city gate. I don't mind killing an sovereign lord in the southern region. Xianyuan Gaoyan shouted. Roar. A domineering dragon roar resounded. A terrifying black dragon with 8 wings flew out from the void and circled below Xianyuan Gaoyan's feet. This was the beast emperor of the Xianyuan bloodline, the mount of the previous patriarchs. Its danger level was second only to Xianyuan Gaoyan himself. Kill me? That depends on whether you have the ability or not. A female voice rebuked. Yi Ninghong flew out from the main battleship. She was wrapped in resplendent emperor light as she floated above the 9 heavens. She was at the same height as Xianyuan Gaoyan. Immediately after, the demonic Oriole let out a shrill cry. Granny Ing transformed into her true form and spread her 8 wings. It was like a dark cloud covering the sun, causing the entire void to be shrouded in haze. She also circled below Yi Ninghong's feet. In terms of seniority, Granny Ing was Palace Master Ye's senior. But in terms of status, Yi Ninghong was the patriarch of a sect and the descendant of the Night Demon Emperor. The demonic Oriole was her mount. At this moment, 2 sovereign lords and 2 8-winged demonic beasts were facing each other in the void. It was like the battle in Feng City. The atmosphere was extremely tense. Do you have the ability? Xianyuan Gaoyan's dignified eyes narrowed. His eyes were extremely cold as he waved his hand. Whoosh! An army of experts appeared out of thin air on his right. This army's aura was extremely tyrannical. There were many experts, and many of them were at the Emperor realm. Moreover, they were dressed differently from the Xianyuan family. Instead, they were from the Li family of Bao. Whoosh! Xianyuan Gaoyan waved his hand again. At the same time, another army of experts appeared on his left. When this army of experts appeared, the entire world seemed to have turned into a scene of magma. The temperature rose sharply, and a large amount of flame energy lingered in the air. The flames did not dissipate and did not extinguish. It was as if a divine flame had descended. In the sea of flames, there were countless figures wearing flaming robes. Their auras were terrifyingly strong. This was especially true for the leader of the group. He was tall, and his face was cold and handsome. His long golden hair fell to his waist, and he wore a wide flaming divine robe. There was a huge sun halo behind him, and his aura was boundless. Even Xianyuan Gaoyan, who was beside him, seemed a little dim under this sun halo. The emperor of the fierce Sun Temple, an expert in the southern region who was known as the fire god. He was the sun god. With the three of us attacking, what are your chances of winning? Xianyuan Gaoyan's tensed brows finally relaxed. This battle was 3 against 1. How could 3 great emperors not be able to deal with Yininghong? As for the old ghost of the Zheng clan, he was a 4th-level emperor. He was not even worthy of carrying the shoes of any of them. This battle would be a battle without any suspense. Xianyuan Gaoyan was even confident that he could kill Yininghong on the spot without any injuries. Gulp! It was unknown which disciple of the divine palace swallowed his saliva. His expression stiffened, and his heart trembled inexplicably. Not only him, but almost all the disciples of the divine palace swallowed their saliva in the next second. Even the old ancestor of the Zheng clan shuddered at this moment. They were shocked. They were really shocked. Actually, when the Xianyuan family army appeared, they were already shocked. However, they were still able to maintain their composure. Now it was different. There were 3 great emperors in the void. No matter which side it was, there were many emperors behind them. This terrible situation seemed to be different from what senior brother Qin Hao had said. The difference in strength between the 2 sides was too obvious. However, it did not matter too much. Muri alone was enough. Although that was the case, at this moment, everyone still felt a chill in their hearts. At least the Zheng clan's momentum had been completely crushed. Palace Lord Yi, how have you been? In the void, the man with golden eyes and golden hair that reached his waist spoke faintly. When he spoke, it was as if the flames of the entire world were flowing. Palace Lord Yang, it's better that you don't interfere in this matter, said Yininghong. Yininghong said. 1 against 3, her aura was not weak at all. But Yu Qianyang is dead. The sun god's golden eyes fell on Qin Hao, who was above the Zheng clan's worship. This gaze seemed to make Qin Hao feel as if his soul was being burned, and his divine soul was burning. Yu Qianyang was dead. This was the revenge of the divine palace. The saint had been killed. If the dignified overlord did not even dare to fart, how could he, the sun god, have the face to stay in the southern region? If he did not come today, then in the future, would the people of the fierce Sun Temple be bullied by the small sect of the southern region? Do you have to do this? Yininghong said with a trace of pity in her voice. Yu Qianyang's death was more than justified. He should not have jumped around in front of Qin Hao and chased him all the way from Golden Light City to the Divine Palace. He did not want to give up and colluded with Chang Helou to kill Qin Hao. But Yu Qianyang and Qin Hao had a personal grudge after all. On the day the Music Palace was destroyed, Elder Qi of the Divine Palace, who had captured the Centaur brothers, had been killed. This debt was completely settled. However, if the Sun God wanted to take revenge for the people under his sect, the outcome would be completely different. The Divine Palace would definitely suffer a great calamity. This was not what Yininghong wanted to see. The Sun God was not as overbearing as Xianyuan Gaoyan. He focused on the great path of fire. The death of one imperial lord was enough for the southern region. If all the imperial lords died, the orthodoxy of the southern region would definitely decline. Sooner or later, it would become like Western Liang, and it would be difficult for an imperial lord to appear again. The Sun God was silent for a moment. Then, he used his actions to give Yininghong an answer. He raised his slender finger and a flame burst out. The flame suddenly exploded and the void shook. The great path seemed to be burned through, and countless flame holes appeared in the sky. Dong! A giant lava leg stepped out of one of the holes. Then, the hole gradually expanded as if it was about to explode. Thousands of people were shocked to see a lava giant emerge from the hole. It was 100 feet tall and stood in the void. A pair of castle-like hands pounded its chest crazily, shaking off a large amount of lava liquid. Dong! 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 1, 2, 3. More than 100 feet tall lava giants emerged from the holes one after another. There were more than 10 of them. The terrible flame Qi of the Great Path forced Xianyuan Gaoyan and the people of the Li family to dodge. The Sun God lives up to his name, Emperor Ao said. Said Sovereign Lord Bei Ao. His cultivation level wasn't lower than his. If you destroy one of my people, you must bury the whole family with him. The voice of the Divine Palace Lord rang out. He was the Emperor of the Great Path of Fire, but his words seemed to be able to freeze the world. Roar, roar, roar. More than 10 lava giants surrounded the Sun God and pounded their chests. The roar was so strong that it tore through the great path of space, broke through the haze of the 8-winged demon Oriole, and shook the black dragon restlessly. In the sky above the imperial city, countless emperors covered their ears with their hands, looking extremely painful. Chapter 1569. The upper echelons of the various overlords looked at the lava giant. Even the emperor-level masters of the southern and northern Ao emperors felt fear in their hearts. Everyone knew that they were formed by the fire spirits and nurtured by the heavens and earth. Their status in the Divine Palace was equivalent to that of the Xianyuan family's beast emperor. The fire spirits themselves did not have intelligence. However, after being nourished by the flames of the previous palace masters, the power of the rules that the previous palace masters had comprehended was integrated into them. Their consciousness resonated with the host, as if the will of the previous palace masters existed. Even if they did not have intelligence, they were more loyal than the most loyal disciples. They would absolutely carry out the orders of the host without any fear. Especially in Yang Shun's generation. Yang Shun was extremely talented and was a legend himself. He had lived with the lava fire spirits since he was young and used them as playmate. He could receive the fire spirits' will even when he was sleeping. He cultivated step by step to become an emperor-level master. Along the way, he carried too much fame and glory. Back then, Yang Shun's name in the southern region was comparable to Showuk's. Showuk was born to be a swordsman, and Yang Shun was born to be a representative of fire. He was born with a Dao body, so he was called Yang Shun by the martial artists of the southern region. The previous generation of the Divine Palace had 2 emperors, both of whom were emperors. These 2 emperors never accepted any disciples, no matter how talented they were. They only had one disciple, Yang Shun, and they did their best to nurture him. One could imagine how high the Divine Palace's expectations of him were. Compared to the sword sect's expectations of Showuk, they were even higher, and Yang Shun did not disappoint his elders. He eventually became an emperor-level master and supported the glory of the Divine Palace. At this moment, Yang Shun's eyes were extremely sharp. The lava giants surrounded him, and their golden eyes contained the terrifying power of fire. It was as if one look could burn an emperor-level master to death. He stared at Yi Ninghong and used his actions to show his determination. He had to fight this battle. Although he was not a domineering person, he was even more ruthless than Xianyuan Gaoyan. In the past, the 2 emperor lords of the temple coexisted, and the sect's prestige was at its peak. No matter which sect in the southern mountain range it was, they had to be respectful. As Yang Shun spoke, he took a step forward towards Yi Ninghong. His foot shook the void and a blazing flame appeared. His eyes became sharper. Back in the day, the sect was so powerful and prosperous. Even the Xianyuan family was inferior to the imperial masters. However, one day 2 of his teachers were killed by Dendi of the East Continent. His arrow destroyed all the dignity of the sect. From then on, the temple sect's position in the southern region declined abruptly. A large number of talents left the sect, causing it to wither and experience the danger of annihilation several times. That arrow had left an indelible scar and shadow in his heart. His 2 masters owed him a great debt of gratitude, but they were killed by Dendi of the East Continent with a single arrow. At that time, he was only in his early 20s, and his cultivation had just entered the honorable realm not long ago. He had witnessed Denda's tyrannical strength with his own eyes. A great emperor of the Tao realm could not even withstand a single blow from his arrow. It was terrifying and hateful. At that time, he swore that in this life, he would never allow any disciple of the temple to be humiliated, and he would not let the world belittle the scorching sun temple. Becoming an emperor lord was not important, it was just a process of martial arts cultivation. His target was Dendi of the East Continent. Although Yu Qianyang is not my disciple, he is still a member of the temple and was elected as the saint by the elders. Today I will kill anyone who dares to stop me. Even if you are the successor of the Night Demon Emperor, I will not hesitate to pay any price. Get out of my way! Yang Shen shouted and stepped forward, causing the void to tremble. Temple Lord Yang, please reconsider. Yi Ninghong knew that Yu Qianyang was not his disciple, but was actually a disciple of the deputy temple lord. However, the martial artists of the southern region were still used to associating the saint with Yang Shen, calling him the successor of Yang Shen. However, if they fought today, they would be in the wrong position, and it would be irreversible. The sun god would probably follow in the footsteps of his two masters. Buzz! Flames surged, and the sun halo behind Yang Shen shone with a terrifying light of rules. Rays of light entered the bodies of the lava giants one after another. They seemed to suddenly have souls, and their huge and empty eyes were burning with golden flames. They stepped forward at the same time, causing the void to tremble. Their fists punched forward, and their movements were in sync. They shot out more than 10 magma fire pillars, surrounding Yi Ninghong and burning her. It was extremely terrifying. At this moment, Qin Hao's pupils constricted as he stared at the Lord of the Divine Palace, who was known as the Sun God, from afar. The other party's chiseled face seemed familiar, as if he had inadvertently seen it once in his previous life. It's him. Qin Hao remembered. 600 years ago, because of some friction, he had chased after the ancestor of the Xianyuan family, Xianyuan Wutian. However, when he chased him to the southern region, Xianyuan Wutian was afraid of the power of the sunset divine Bao and retreated into the family's protective array. Qin Hao couldn't find a way to break it for a while. At that time, he had alarmed many emperors in the southern region, including a pair of brothers who were proficient in the power of fire. Both of them were at the peak of the path-proving realm. They had spoken rudely and were killed on the spot. And this Yang Shen had once witnessed it at the scene. Because he felt a strong hatred, Qin Hao glanced at him. This person is the successor of the temple's 2 emperors. Qin Hao thought. He didn't pay attention back then. As a Nirvana great emperor, why would he care about a venerable realm warrior? However, 600 years later, this person had grown to the emperor realm, a great emperor at the peak of the path-proving realm. His power of fire was not inferior to that of the temple's 2 emperors, and even surpassed them. However, it was still useless. Although Qin Hao had lost the cultivation of his previous life, what could he do now that senior sister was here? Sigh. Yi Ninghong sighed. As Yang Shen attacked, she had to fight back. Whoosh! In the distant sky, a sword light flashed. Its speed was incomparably fast. At first, it was a light spot, but in the blink of an eye, it whistled into the field and stopped in between Yi Ninghong and Yang Shen. At this moment, there was an extremely powerful sword qi raging between the two of them, turning into a terrifying sword qi storm. Countless sword qi flew into the storm, like the spikes of a hedgehog, densely packed. The powerful force actually tore apart the lava that the dozen lava giants had shot out, leaving not even a speck of it behind. The space was still, and the sword qi and magma dissipated at the same time. However, a man's figure appeared in the field. This man was 9 feet tall, wearing a jade crown on his head. His elegant long hair fluttered in the wind. He stood in front of Yang Shen with his hands behind his back. His eyes were like stars, and his eyebrows were like two sword edges. His temperament was extraordinary, like a gentleman's sword. His body was full of righteousness, making people sigh with admiration. Sword Emperor. Yang Shen's golden eyes narrowed. Wuk was the master of the sword sect, the only great emperor of the way of the sword in the southern region. His cultivation and status were on par with him. But at this moment, Sword Emperor was not the only one present. As the void trembled, two other figures stepped out of the space crack at the same time. Behind each of them was a group of powerful cultivators. Arhat Palace, Emperor Luo. Ning Wu, the new master of the Ning Kingdom, Emperor Ming. At the same time, they appeared and set up a battle array, confronting Xianyuan Gaoyan and the Li family of the Northern Pride. Behind these two emperors were the masters of the Arhat Palace. The 9 hall masters and 4 protectors were all present, and there were many human sovereign realm cultivators. In addition to Emperor Ming, Ning Wu also sent 6 emperors and some human sovereign realm cultivators. As the sword light broke through the air, Elder Meng and many other senior members of the sword sect rushed over and stood behind Sword Emperor. In an instant, in the sky above the imperial city of the Xianyuan family, all the emperors of the southern region gathered together. None of the overlord-level forces were absent. It was a prehistoric extravagance, a true feast of the powerful. At this moment, the faces of the senior members of the family behind Xianyuan Gaoyan changed drastically. Even the countless southern region itinerant cultivators who were watching the battle from afar were stunned on the spot. The overlord-level forces were all present. 3 sovereigns, 4 sects, a total of 7 emperors. It was simply. Many itinerant cultivators of the southern region looked at the Zheng tribe army and focused their attention on Qin Hao. Everyone knew that the person who had caused this situation was Qin Hao. How honorable was this for 7 emperors to gather together. In the history of the southern region, it had never been as grand as today. I had nothing to do, so I took a look at the scenery. I didn't expect everyone to be here. We really have a tacit understanding. At this moment, Sword Emperor spoke with a smile. Makamanji, Emperor Luo. Xianyuan Gaoyan's face suddenly twisted. He took a heavy step forward and stood side by side with Sun God. Makamanji was Sword Emperor's natal. He was Shou Wuk's uncle. Was he here for Qin Hao? If it wasn't for Qin Hao, why would he block Sun God's fire of the way for Yininghong? Xianyuan Gaoyan's face was very ugly. He realized that the Sword Sect, Arhat Palace, and Ning Wu Empire had come with ill intentions. After all, Ning Wu was still Zheng's ally on the surface. It was impossible for him to miss this battle. However, Xianyuan Gaoyan didn't expect Sword Sect and Arhat Palace to get involved in this mess. He had naturally considered that Ning Wu would make a move when he joined forces with Sun God and Baoli family. If Ning Wu dared to come, they wouldn't be at a disadvantage since they had 3 emperors. However, Sword Sect and Arhat Palace had disrupted Xianyuan Gaoyan's plans. Look at how nervous you are. Didn't old Mu just say that we had nothing to do, so we went to look at the scenery? What a coincidence we actually got together. Ah, the weather is especially good today. Emperor Luo, a boorish man who was nearly 3 meters tall, covered his bald head with a large palm, his eyes twisting as he casually looked into the distance, as if to show everyone that he had only come to look at the scenery. Xianyuan Gaoyan's face turned green. He felt his chest tighten and a gush of blood rush up. Look at the scenery? I don't believe you. It's better that you don't interfere in this matter, Sun God said coldly. He stared at Makamanji as if he was only talking to Sword Emperor. He was the only one in his eyes. You think too much. We are indeed only here to look at the scenery, Emperor Ming said. Looking at Sun God and Sword Emperor, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. It was rumored that Sun God and Sword Emperor were close friends. It seemed that the rumors were true. The relationship between these two was indeed not ordinary. However, no matter how good their relationship was in private, they were now on different sides and had become opponents. "Makamanji, answer me," Sun God said as he stepped forward. His flames of the way pressed forward. Of all the people here, he didn't want to fight Sword Emperor. "I'm only here to look at the scenery." Emperor Yunzong's face was calm as he repeated what he had just said. Sun God stared at Sword Emperor's face for a long time before slowly retreating. Then, he and Xianyuan Gaoyan looked at each other. At this moment, their eyes flashed with determination as they reached a consensus. "Kill." Xianyuan Gaoyan waved his hand heavily, and his voice spread throughout the imperial city. Chapter 1570. Just looking at the scenery? The Jing tribe had joined forces with the Night Net Palace to attack. Why did they choose to come here? Did they think he was a fool? Xianyuan Gaoyan knew that the Sword Arch and the encompassing Arch weren't here just to look at the scenery. Even though they didn't openly stand on the Jing tribe's side, they had the intention of helping the Jing tribe. If not, why did they block the Yang God Dao fire for Yininghong? However, Xianyuan Gaoyan could also see that the Sword Sect, the Arhat Palace, and Emperor Ning Wu Ming didn't really plan to involve the sect in the war. Otherwise, they wouldn't have only brought so few people. They would have gone all out. After all, the Xianyuan royal family was an imperial family with a strong foundation. If they went all out, even the Sword Sect and the Arhat Palace would suffer great losses. Xianyuan Gaoyan saw everything clearly. Makamanji wouldn't let his disciples take risks so easily. That would cause the sect's strength to decline. But now they said they were just looking at the scenery. Good. He would let them open their eyes wide and watch how the Xianyuan royal family slaughtered the weak Jing family and the female lunatic of the Night Luo Palace without leaving a single one alive. When the overlords started a war, the key to victory wasn't the emperors, but the overall strength of the sect. No matter how strong the emperor was, he was only one person. His foundation was the king. Xianyuan Gaoyan and the Sun God didn't have to do anything. They could let their disciples fight for Makamanji, but when they saw the Jing tribe and Night Net Palace's disciples die, the Sword Arch, the encompassing Arch, and Emperor Ning Wu Ming would naturally give up on helping Qin Hao. Therefore, there was nothing for the emperors to do. They could just look at the scenery together. As the chess players, they could play with the wind and clouds and watch the chess pieces fight. 1. Emperor Xianyuan gave the order. The silent imperial city seemed to be activated in an instant. Battle intent shot up into the sky and the war drums thundered. At this moment, an ear-piercing sound of a flute resounded in the imperial city. The sound spread forward and quickly enveloped the sky above the beast-tied army. When the magical sound entered their ears, it stimulated the nerves of every demonic beast. Their consciousness became extremely berserk, and their eyes flashed with intense killing intent. Like a tide breaking through the dam, they rushed madly towards the Jing tribe's ground troops with a majestic aura. Su Jin. Qin Hao ordered. This crazy beast-tied army was controlled by a spirit beast sect. The beast's power couldn't be ignored. Before exchanging blows with the Xianyuan family's troops, they couldn't overdo it. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Looking down from the sky, Qin Hao saw that the beast tide was like a black line rushing forward. It stirred up clouds of dust and wanted to drown the young man in the air. Their speed was very fast, and they arrived in the blink of an eye. But at this moment, a soul flute was placed under Su Jin's lips. A second flute sound spread across the battlefield. Countless notes spread out from Su Jin's lips and turned into a huge light cover. It covered the heads of the beast tide and absorbed the souls of all the beasts. A miraculous scene happened. The rampaging beast tide suddenly stopped and stood quietly in place. It was actually controlled by Su Jin. Whoosh, The flute sound in the imperial city became hurried. It created friction with the air, and became extremely sharp. When this force blasted into the consciousness of the beast tide again, the originally quiet beast tide army became restless. Their eyes shone with a bloodthirsty light again. But because of Su Jin's sound, they didn't dare to move forward and fell into a state of struggle. Qin Hao opened his red lotus fiery eyes. 2 scarlet rays of light shot out from the depths of his eyes. He scanned the city and accurately found the beast tamer who was controlling the beast tide. It was a middle-aged beast tamer. His body was surging with a bright golden light. A level 9 primitive emperor. No wonder Su Jin was obstructed. Qin Hao guessed that this person was most likely the patriarch of the spirit beast sect, because behind him there was a familiar silhouette, Chang Heluo. The leader of the spirit beast sect was a little stronger than the master of the music palace, but not at the level of Yu Luxin. A level 9 primitive emperor who hadn't comprehended the rules could at most delay Su Jin for a few seconds. It would be difficult to escape the fate of defeat. Leader, let me do it. You are not that person's opponent. At this moment, Chang Heluo said to the middle-aged beast tamer. Not only did Qin Hao see it, but Chang Heluo also knew it very well. He could tell who the opponent was from the intertwined flute sound. Su Jin, a personal disciple of the Yaoguang Peak. Humph, after being away for 3 years, you don't even put me in your eyes? The leader of the spirit beast sect snorted. Chang Heluo? Did he look down on him? Who was Chang Heluo? In order to become his disciple, he knelt 3 times and kowtowed 9 times and acknowledged him as his master. Now, he didn't even call him master. He just called him sect leader. At this moment, many elders of the spirit beast sect looked at Chang Heluo with eyes full of disdain and disdain. In order to reach a higher position, this person kept climbing the strong without any dignity. Even if he acknowledged Xianyuan Wuying as his adoptive father, the sect had cultivated him. Instead of repaying the kindness, he dared to look down on the sect leader. What a shameless and despicable person. That being said, the elders of the spirit beast sect could feel that the opponent sent by the Jing dynasty was very strong. The sect leader was obviously struggling. Buzz. An intense soul light raged. The sect leader of the spirit beast sect seemed to have noticed the strange looks in the elder's eyes. Suddenly, all of his soul power burst out and rushed into the soul flute. At this moment, a turbulent sound wave shrouded the city wall in front of them, shaking the space. Countless Xianyuan soldiers felt like their heads were about to explode. They all held their heads tightly. However, the counterattack of the Jing dynasty's flute was even more majestic. It was like the sound of the great Tao resonating with heaven and earth. It overpowered the sect leader of the spirit beast sect. Whoosh! As if a thorn had penetrated his brain, the sect leader of the spirit beast sect was immersed in playing the flute. He felt an inexplicable stabbing pain in his head. He only felt his blood boiling. The soul power in his body went out of control and became chaotic. It was as if his soul was suddenly pierced. A mouthful of blood spurted 3 feet away. With a bang, the soul flute was shattered. The sect leader of the spirit beast sect fell from the sky. Suddenly, the sound of the flute in the city disappeared. Sect leader. The elders of the spirit beast sect were shocked. The sect leader's cultivation was at the 9th stage, but he couldn't hold on for more than 10 breaths? The Jing dynasty's beast tamer was so terrifying that he could control the sect leader's soul from a distance and knock him out. But in this way, the beast tied ahead would be controlled by the other party and would counterattack the imperial city. Clang! Almost at the second the sect leader of the spirit beast sect was defeated, the sound of a guqin came from the imperial city and took over the beast tamer's position. Chang Heluo sat on the ground. The guqin spirit under him shone with dazzling light. His 10 fingers danced, and the sound of the guqin rang. The sound waves of the battle fanaticism swept forward, spreading over the city walls and shrouding the beast tide. At this moment, the sound of the guqin resonated with the great Tao and suppressed the sound of the flute. Under the suppression, Su Jin's flute sound became weaker and weaker. The beast tide rioted again. Half-step to the great emperor realm. Among the Xianyuan royal family's higher-ups, Xianyuan Wuying looked at Chang Helou. Seeing the young man play the guqin as if he was commanding an army, his eyes became twisted. But gradually, a smile appeared at the corner of Xianyuan Wuying's mouth. He praised nervously, "You are indeed my son. Feng Er's cultivation has improved so quickly. He will soon surpass me." Wuying, wake up. He is not Feng Er. The first prince, Xianyuan Wuba, clenched his fists tightly. There was some pain on his face. In Golden Light City, Xianyuan Feng died at the hands of Qin Hao. That incident was a heavy blow to his brother. He actually imagined that Chang Helou was Xianyuan Feng. He could not distinguish reality from reality and could not extricate himself. Usually it would be fine. But today, the family was in danger of being exterminated. Xianyuan Wuying should not be foolish. I know he is not Feng Er. You don't have to remind me. Xianyuan Wuying suddenly turned his head and stared at Xianyuan Wuba with a pair of bloodshot eyes. His expression was somewhat terrifying. In the past few years, the people in the family thought that he had lost his mind and was crazy. But what could he do if he did not pretend to be stupid? Xianyuan Feng could not be revived. His son's spiritual soul was destroyed. Even the universe divine land could not save him. He knew that the one playing the guqin was Chang Helou. They were not related by blood at all. But he wanted to be like this. Could he not even have a little bit of the right to an illusion? At this time, the elders looked at the eldest prince, Xianyuan Wuba, and the second prince, Xianyuan Wuying. They were all silent and did not dare to speak. These two were the blood of the emperor. Who would dare to say anything? However, speaking of which, Chang Helou was indeed different from before. After his return, his cultivation had become ridiculously strong. It was unknown just what had happened to him in the past 3 years. Did he manage to enter the legendary, divine palace? The upper echelons of the Xianyuan royal family did not know that except for Chang Helou, none of the family talents sent to participate in the recruitment came back alive. Moreover, Chang Helou did not mention a word about this. He only said one thing, and that was that Xianyuan Wuba's son, Xianyuan Jie, was also killed by Qin Hao. Clang! The sound of the great path's guqin enveloped the world. The sound of the flute gradually weakened. At this moment, the beast tide was stimulated by the sound of the guqin and rushed toward the Jing dynasty's formation again. Chang Helou. Su Jin recognized from the sound of the guqin. As a personal disciple of the Yaoguang Peak, how could he not know the other's musical skills? Especially, Guden's physical body was destroyed by the other party. If it was not for Qin Hao's help and borrowed Su Jin's body to return, he would have died. Even if Chang Helou turned into a ghost, Guden would not forget the aura on him. It was engraved in his soul. Logically speaking, I should suppress you one-on-one and use the power of the soul flute to avenge Senior Su Jin and Senior Qinggu. Guden looked at the Xianyuan royal city. The royal family forces opposite him were very strong. Sword Sect, Arhat Palace, so many seniors had come specially for this. They put down all their affairs and did not allow him to waste time. Fellow disciples of the Tao Peak, lend me a hand. Guden raised his head and shouted to the void. It was time to gather the strength of all the disciples of the Yaoguang Peak. Of course, he was not afraid of Chang Helou. They were both half-step emperors and had comprehended the laws. Who was afraid of who? Moreover, now that Guden had taken Yu Luxin's monarch rank and formed a complete monarch body, he was actually stronger than Chang Helou. However, it would not be easy to kill him. In order to save time, he could only call the disciples of the Yaoguang Peak to gang up on him. Swoosh! Swoosh! Chapter 1571. Young men and women stood side by side. There were more than 50 of them, and they all had outstanding temperament. Their bodies flickered with the brilliance of sound techniques at the same frequency. With Su Jin as the center, they seemed to have become one in an instant. These people were all from Yaoguang Peak. Heavenly sound resonance. One of the disciples spoke with a solemn expression. Yaoguang heavenly sound resonance, was a unique technique of the Divine Palace. When the disciples of Yaoguang Peak performed this technique, they could resonate with the consciousness of those who performed it at the same time. Borrowing the mystery of sound techniques, they could achieve a fusion of soul power. Although Yaoguang heavenly sound could not achieve the fusion of everyone's power of rules like the 12 ecliptic arrays, just the fusion of soul power alone was already terrifying. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Beams of soul light were released one after another. Guqin spirits, guzheng, jade flute, and so on. Many weapon spirits flickered and fell into the hands of the disciples of Yaoguang Peak. At this moment, the same tune came out of everyone's Guqin spirit. Their sound techniques came from the same source, and the great path of space resonated. Waves of soul power flowed and poured into Su Jin's body. Suddenly, everyone's consciousness was connected and became a complete whole. Su Jin only felt his head shake violently. His 5 senses became clearer. The soul power in his body surged, and even the rules were strengthened. This momentary increase in cultivation made him feel as if he was touching the Emperor's path. The platinum luster on the surface of his body became more and more dazzling. He was like an emperor. Rules into the soul. Su Jin whispered, and the sound of the flute rose again. Buzz. An invisible storm of sound was born. Strong light raged, filling heaven and earth as if it had replaced the will of the great path. Wisps of terrible sound light crushed toward the tide of beasts, invading Changhe Lo's Guqin and immediately suppressing it. Inside the city, the soul light around Changhe Lo's body fluctuated violently. His brow was twisted, and he showed an extremely painful expression. His Guqin spirit collided with the sound of the flute, but the other party's soul power suddenly exploded. The power was extremely powerful and boundless. Affected by the sound of the flute, Changhe Lo's spiritual soul was invaded by the rules. His whole body felt like it was about to be torn apart and destroyed. Even his fingers became stiff uncontrollably. His Guqin spirit trembled and was about to crack. Boundless. Changhe Lo's Guqin spirit. However, as soon as he spoke, he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood onto the ground. His sitting posture suddenly tilted backward, and the back of his head smashed heavily onto the ground, shattering the stone floor and shattering his Guqin spirit. Pfff, cough cough. Changhe Lo collapsed to the ground and convulsed uncontrollably. His face was completely devoid of color, and it was clear that his consciousness had been severely damaged, rendering him unable to battle any longer. Su Jin's body also trembled violently. A surge of power of rules surged into his mind. The scene in front of him suddenly changed. Everyone disappeared. It was as if he was in a boundless wilderness. The great Tao was boundless, and he was imprisoned by heaven and earth. Calm. Senior brother Su. By Su. Su Jin stared at the beast tide with a resolute expression. Hum. The sound of the great path resonated. Everyone was enveloped by the sound. The sound of the flute surged forward. It completely covered the beast. It invaded the consciousness of every beast and took control of them. At this moment, Su Jin could clearly feel the will of every beast. It was as if their souls had entered the bodies of the beasts. They turned around and rushed back to Xianyuan Imperial City. The earth trembled under the beast's hooves. He wanted to use the beast as a weapon to break the city wall. The expressions of countless Xianyuan Imperial family soldiers changed drastically. In an instant, the beast tide actually turned around and charged towards them. It covered the sky and covered the earth, and its aura could devour mountains and rivers. Where were the people of the spirit beast sect? Why didn't they control the beast? No one gave them an explanation. Between the heavens and earth, a thunderous boom rang out as the massive beast tide slammed heavily into the city walls of Xianyuan Royal City. The majestic golden city walls extended endlessly, but at the same time, they were completely occupied by the bodies of countless beasts. The powerful impact caused the entire city wall to shake. Countless soldiers of the Xianyuan royal family looked down and saw that the walls were covered with corpses of demonic beasts. Blood was dripping everywhere, and it was a ghastly sight. In this collision, many low-level beasts were crushed to death by the high-level beasts. However, they were fearless. Activate the city defense formation. A general of the Xianyuan family commanding the front line shouted. Although this fierce bombardment did not cause any substantial impact to the imperial city, it had damaged the morale of the soldiers. The Xianyuan family would never allow or tolerate these dirty beasts to provoke them. Whoosh! The vast formation light lit up the city wall. It was endlessly bright. The raging light washed away the blood stains on the wall, making the imperial city sacred again. In the formation light, the nearby beasts were completely evaporated. Not a drop of blood was left. They had all disappeared. Only those who had reached the pinnacle of the venerable beasts and the low-level beast emperors had a chance to survive. However, even the low-level beast emperors were covered in wounds after facing the formation light. High-level beast emperors fell to the ground. Blood flowed everywhere. They were too weak to get up and attack again. In an instant, nearly one-third of the beast tide army disappeared. The crowded space became loose. It's just as senior sister said. Sujin frowned. The power of this formation was quite terrifying. If it was the Zheng clan who attacked the city just now, one could imagine how heavy the losses would be. Then, it was time to change people. Breaking the formation was not the specialty of the Yaoguang Peak disciples. Junior brothers of the Uni Peak, thank you for your trouble. On the Void warship, Qin Hao looked down and said. Many Uni Peak disciples smiled and jumped off the warship one after another. They collectively landed in front of the city wall. Senior sister had secretly taught them the method of breaking the formation. They just needed to do it according to the method. Streams of light descended. Sujin raised his head and looked at the training ground of the Uni Peak disciples. Protect him. The Uni Peak was good at formations, but their individual combat strength was not complementary. If a human sovereign came out of the city, the disciples of the Uni Peak would be in trouble. Many Yaoguang Peak disciples smiled. Their primordial spirits flickered, and a layer of bright light enveloped the disciples of the Uni Peak, allowing them to do whatever they wanted. Junior brothers and sisters, don't embarrass senior brother. A young man of the Uni Peak said. This was the first time they had fought with someone after leaving the Divine Palace. Success or failure represented the dignity of the Uni Peak. If the spirit of the Uni Peak was here, it would not allow them to fail. Chapter 1572. In the sky, the 7 Emperor Lords stood in the air. Light surrounded their bodies as they calmly looked down at the battlefield, as if they were not involved in this matter. At this moment, Xianyuan Gaoyan frowned slightly. His gaze pierced through the clouds and landed on Sujin, who was in front of the Zheng clan's army. There was a trace of displeasure on his face. Just now, in the battle of sound techniques, the leader of the spiritual beast clan and Chang Hello had both been defeated by this young man. This young man's attainments in sound techniques were extraordinary. Was he the one who stole the heart of music's trial and destroyed the music palace? Xianyuan Gaoyan had never heard of such a young talent in the southern region. Presumably, he was not from the southern region. He wondered how Qin Hao got to know this person. But this was not important. Seeing another group of people land and form a formation to attack the city walls, Xianyuan Gaoyan couldn't help but snort contemptuously. Xianyuan Gaoyan, aren't you worried at all? Emperor Luo asked with a smile. His son, Luo Yuliang, had returned and naturally heard that the group of young people gathered around Qin Hao were all famous geniuses of the continent. They were also disciples of the divine palace. The city wall array would not be able to stop them. Why should I be worried about mere renhuangs? Xianyuan Gaoyan replied with a serious expression. Did he need to send out emperors to stop them? Even if Emperor Luo and Emperor Sword attacked, they would not be able to shake the city wall array without using all their strength, let alone a dozen renhuangs. And this array was only the first array to protect the city. Unless the other party knew how to gather the power of the array and had participated in the laying of the array foundation. Otherwise, even emperors would not be able to break it easily. In front of the city wall, more than a dozen disciples of the Uni Peak stood in the air in a unique position. They seemed to be closely connected to each other. Traces of array power flowed between them. Then, a layer of turbulent array light erupted from them. The array light shook and turned into infinite power that surged into the body of the disciple at the front. The disciple's sleeves fluttered, and a dazzling light shot up into the sky above the city wall. It was a huge jade ruler that was dazzling all over. Lord Taoist ruler, a mid-grade emperor weapon, the most powerful tool of the Uni Peak to break arrays. After the divine palace was destroyed by the evil spirits, Muri's primordial spirit left her body and sneaked into the Uni Peak to hide it. Today, the Taolord ruler had regained its former glory. The gigantic jade ruler hung in the sky, emitting a terrifying amount of energy. It was as if one strike could destroy all living things. If the Daojun ruler's full power is activated, its power will be comparable to that of a second realm emperor, the Emperor of True Self. The disciple controlling the Daolord ruler muttered proudly. Although the Lord Dao ruler couldn't compare to the Qinquan dust in perfected Lord Yun Yi's hands, it was still a rare sacred item of Dao Peak. Today, he was fortunate enough to be able to control it. It was enough for him to brag about it for the rest of his life. Of course, he would have to return it to senior sister after this. Break. The disciple had a vicious look on his face as he absorbed the power of the formation that everyone had formed. He pointed at the air and shot out a ray of light that entered the Dao Lord ruler. At the same time, he chanted, and countless golden talismans floated out from his mouth. They fluttered about and coiled around the Dao Lord ruler. Instantly, the jade ruler expanded once more. With a hum, it became 300 m wide. The brilliance on it became even more dazzling, and it emanated a terrifying pressure that could shatter the Grand Tao. Kaboom! The giant ruler slammed down, causing the sky to tremble. It was as if an invisible hand had reached down from the heavens, grabbed the ruler tightly, and smashed it against the city wall. When this strike landed, it was as if the heavens had collapsed. The protective formation that Xianyuan Gaoyan was so proud of couldn't even withstand a single blow. It shattered with a bang, and the sturdy city wall, which had a metallic luster, caved in deeply. Then, a deafening explosion rang out. Countless bricks flew into the sky, along with the pitiful figures of the Xianyuan family soldiers. They were all sent flying into the sky and were annihilated by the power of the Daolord ruler. This scene was too spectacular. By the time everyone reacted, the city tower had already disappeared. A 100-meter-long hole appeared in the part of the city wall that had been attacked. The soldiers guarding it had all evaporated into thin air. Even the parts of the city wall that hadn't been attacked by the Daolord ruler became distorted. This power! The encompassing emperor was stunned. He was given a fright. How is this possible? Xianyuan Gaoyan's eyes widened in disbelief. Although the city wall's formation wasn't the Xianyuan family's strongest manifestation, it shouldn't have been destroyed in one blow. The Sword Emperor Makamanji probably had to use all his strength and attack several times to do so. However, the city wall had been destroyed by a dozen human emperors. That ruler was a arch weapon. We've completed our mission. Su Jin, I'll leave the rest to you. After recalling the Downlord ruler, Peak and the others' legs were trembling. It was as if they had been tortured by thousands of strong men for 7 days and 7 nights. They were extremely weak. They didn't even have any primordial chi left in their bodies. They rode on the Downlord ruler and flew back to the void battleship with strange grunts. When Su Jin looked up, he was afraid that someone would accidentally fall to his death. Attack! With a smile on his face, the soul flute sounded again. Under the resonance of the heavenly music, Su Jin's body shone brightly. He was like a beast emperor controlling an army of beasts. They rushed into the city through the hole in the city wall. At the same time, the Zheng tribe's ground troops, who were ready to attack, also rushed into the city like a torrent. Every soldier was filled with hot-bloodedness as they charged towards the enemy without the slightest scruple. The 10,000 cultivator alliance's chance to wash away their shame had come. Chapter 1573. Witnessing the destruction of the city wall, the expressions of many of the higher-ups of Nan Ao changed slightly. The Xianyuan royal family had dominated the southern region for thousands of years. In the early days of the imperial city's establishment, they had begun to set up the protective formation. After a long time, it was constantly perfected and strengthened. It was a combination of attack and defense that was almost perfect. The first layer of the city wall was the weakest, but it was enough to withstand the full-force attack of a sovereign master. No one expected that it would be so easily broken by a group of renhuangs. There was a huge gap between renhuangs and sovereign masters. However, they didn't know that it was not the disciples of Peak who destroyed the formation, but the Lord Daojun ruler. The Lord Daojun ruler specialized in countering all kinds of strange formations. It was created by a certain old peak master of Xiantian Peak. Once it fell into the hands of a great emperor who had proven the way, it could unleash the terrifying power of an emperor of true self. Even though the disciples of Peak were only renhuangs and couldn't unleash the power of the Lord Daojun ruler, they could activate it slightly and release the power of the imperial weapon itself. It was not something that a city wall could withstand. The moment the city wall was broken, the army of monsters and the Zheng tribe's ground troops rushed into the city through the gap. They were like a black tide that swallowed everything. At this time, the Xianyuan royal family fully demonstrated the quality of an overlord force. They were not flustered in the face of danger. Arrows and crossbows were released from the top of the city wall. A rain of arrows arced through the sky and fell coldly into the monster tide. Rumble! Chariots rushed out of the gap, carrying burly cavalry in heavy armor. They held heavy spears and arranged themselves in a formation. They filled the gap with tyrannical force and did not allow the enemy to invade the imperial city. Both sides moved extremely quickly. In the blink of an eye, the monster tide collided with the mighty chariot. In just one encounter, a large number of chariots were overturned. Countless people were trampled into meat paste. Their heavy armor couldn't withstand the trampling of the monster hoof. However, in the process, countless low-level demonic beasts were also killed by the crossbow bolts and turned into bloody hedgehogs. The fierce battle was on the verge of breaking out. Most of the low-level warriors on both sides were below the master realm. Although they couldn't compare to the brilliance and splendor of primordial chi released by cultivators above the venerable realm, the close combat was more exciting and exciting. When the scalding blood sprayed onto their faces and flowed into their mouths, the smell of blood deeply stimulated the nerves of countless men, causing them to act even more crazily. However, no matter who it was, as long as they were caught in the chaos, unless their cultivation was extremely high, they would only have one chance to attack before they would immediately fall into a pool of blood. It was as if they had lived for this moment. The light of the fireworks only lasted for a moment. Kill! Countless cultivators of the former Myriad Cultivator Union crossed the beast tide and squeezed into the city. With swords and sabers in hand, they cut down anyone they saw. They were like a group of madmen who had gone berserk. 3 years ago, Nan Ao's army had come to Feng City and brought them a great pressure, as if it was the end of the world. In that battle, Feng City's Sky Cavalry Legion was completely annihilated. More than half of the Saints' army had perished, and countless venerables had perished. Among them, the Night Net Palace's Grand Elder, a quasi-emperor expert, was not spared. How many people had died under the butcher knife of the Xianyuan royal family? They had sacrificed their precious lives to protect their homeland. Even though they had fallen into a desperate situation, the city walls of Feng City had never allowed the enemy to take half a step forward. This was the pride of the cultivators of the Myriad Cultivator Union. Today, they had come to avenge their loved ones and had easily defeated the city defense of Nan Ao's imperial city. This was the imperial city of the Xianyuan royal family. It was simply inspiring. In the past, the people of the Myriad Cultivator Union could not imagine it at all. They did not even dare to dream of it. There was only fear in their hearts, and they were used to being bullied by the overlord forces. However, the moment they stepped into the city of others, it was as if they had transformed from trembling sheep into bloodthirsty demons. The humiliation and fear that had been suppressed in their hearts for countless years finally erupted completely. Many people had tears in their eyes as they waved their sabers and laughed happily. Roar! A human emperor-level great demon fell from the sky and smashed into the city. The ground shook as the 100-feet-long snake body twisted and crushed, crushing countless low-level cultivators. It crawled all the way, crushing a path of blood. 3 ugly snake heads poked out and sprayed poison into the city. More and more high-tier demonic beasts entered the city. A flaming tiger covered in raging flames stepped on top of a restaurant in a domineering manner. 100-meter-long line of fire shot out from the tiger's mouth. As the line of fire swept across, everything that was touched by it was reduced to ashes. Dong! The sky shook. It was an emperor of giant elephants stomping all over the place. Waves of turbulent sound waves shook the ground. Countless cultivators in the city were shaken to the point that they bled from their 7 orifices and died. This beast tide was originally a gift from the spirit beast sect to the Xianyuan royal family. They had gathered from the depths of the mountains and forests of Nan Ao to prepare for their battle. Even though they were controlled by the rhythm and had lost their ability to control themselves, deep in their bones they still had the dignity and pride of a powerhouse, as well as the cruelty and bloodthirstiness of a demon beast. Now, even though they were controlled by Su Jin's flute music, their natural instincts made them even crazier. They seemed to want to vent their dissatisfaction at being enslaved, so they blasted all their resentment into the city. Retreat, retreat again and again. When the war chariot formation was crushed, the city's defenses alone wouldn't be able to hold on. If it was only the 10,000 cultivator union attacking the city, the soldiers under the command of the Xianyuan royal family wouldn't have been afraid. However, the destructive power of this beast tide was too fierce. It wasn't something that they could suppress with their cultivation base. Sacred Army, chase the Jing tribe bastards out. A majestic imperial order descended from the sky. Xianyuan Gaoyan's expression was very ugly at the moment. He had actually allowed the Zheng tribe to break in. Yuan venerate battle formation, exterminate the beast tide. Xianyuan Gaoyan shouted again with an extremely cold expression. His gaze swept across the battlefield and landed on the spirit beast sect master. At the moment, he couldn't help but have the urge to slap him to death. A dignified leader of a first-rate force in the southern region had been defeated by an unknown young beast tamer. How dare the spirit beast sect claim that they knew how to control beasts? Unfortunately, the spirit beast sect master couldn't answer Xianyuan Gaoyan. He had yet to wake up after being knocked unconscious by Su Jin's power of laws. Chapter 1574. High up in the sky, the Xianyuan royal family's army stood orderly. Despite the tragic situation in the city, they were still as calm as a mountain. The forces of the dynasty obeyed the orders of the emperor and their military discipline was strict. Any unwise action would create an opportunity for the enemy to counterattack and disrupt the commander's plan. However, following Xianyuan Gaoyan's order, the Saint army immediately descended with a mighty Saint aura toward the battle in the city. Sensing the pressure above their heads, the martialists of the cultivation union looked up and saw countless heavenly soldiers descending. The pervasive Saint aura struck their souls and made them tremble. Qin Hao obviously wouldn't let the Saint army of the Xianyuan royal family disrupt the flow of entering the city. He waved his hand and the Saint-level cultivators of the Jing family kept descending from the battleships, forming a mighty team. They stopped the Saint army of the Xianyuan royal family before the enemy could attack. In an instant, the two Saint armies clashed in midair. Streaks of terrifying battle formation radiance bombarded the opposing team, causing sonic booms to resound in the sky above Xianyuan royal city. Whoosh! A huge beam of blade light slashed down from the sky with a purple crescent blade light and landed on the three-headed demonic python in the city. This demonic python was a python emperor, yet it was completely cleaved apart by the crescent blade light. Its huge body was annihilated by the devastating blade chi. The power of a blade formation. The Xianyuan royal family's Yuan Venerate battle formation had formed a blade formation. Even a demonic beast emperor couldn't resist it and was instantly killed. Of course, this python emperor's cultivation was relatively weak and had just become a monarch. It wasn't the only one. The demonic beast emperors in the beast tide didn't have high cultivation bases. Otherwise, they wouldn't be manipulated by the spirit beast sex beast taming technique. After all, the spirit beast sex sect master was only a level 9 monarch and couldn't control great demons of the same level. Even so, it was enough to show how terrifying the power of a battle formation was. The huge blade light continued to sweep across. Everywhere it passed, it set off a bloodbath. The more demonic beasts gathered, the faster the blade light swept across. With the Xianyuan royal family's Yuan Venerate battle formation entering the battlefield, the casualties of the beast tide increased drastically. Many demonic beast emperors were slain by the blade, greatly limiting the destructive power of the demonic beasts. Xiang Mo Qin Hao turned around and looked at a young man behind him. This young man was originally the grandson of Xiang Bu, the Grand Elder of the left faction of the Myriad Cultivator Alliance. His cultivation base was at the Venerable Realm. Scared? Qin Hao asked. If he was afraid, there was no need for him to go out. Yuan Venerate martialists from the Xiang family, follow me into the city. Xiang Mo's expression changed before he calmed down and went into battle. He transformed into a beam of light and rushed toward the Yuan Venerate saber array in the city. Behind him, the numerous Yuan Venerates of the left faction formed a large group and followed closely behind Xiang Mo. The moment the group entered the city, they immediately gathered together and erupted with a powerful battle array. Xiang Mo waved his arm down, and a beam of light shot out, which turned into a halberd in the void. The halberd pierced toward the Xianyuan blade matrix, intending to pierce through and destroy it. Pavilion Master Qin, I'm afraid Mo's team isn't enough. The first elder of the left faction, Xiang Bu, had a worried expression on his face. He was naturally afraid that something would happen to his grandson. After all, the Myriad Cultivator Union's team had entered the city, and no one could guarantee that they would not come back alive. Naturally, it's not enough. Qin Hao smiled and waved his hand again. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Numerous figures jumped down from the countless warship. Every one of them had the aura of a Venerate. They formed a second battle array in the sky and moved closer to Xiang Mo's team. They were wary of the other enemy battle arrays and were ready to respond at any time. Upon seeing this, Xiang Bu's worry eased a little. However, he still didn't relax. He wasn't the only one. The higher-ups of the Jing tribe, who were watching the battle from the warship, were also nervous. After all, their side was much weaker than the other side in terms of combat strength. 3 years ago, the Pegasus aerial cavalry had been completely annihilated during the Great Battle in Feng City. More than half of the Saint-level martialists had died, and one of the 3 Yuan Venerate battle arrays had also been destroyed. It hadn't been long since the last great battle, and the clan still hadn't replenished its forces. There were only 2 Yuan Venerate troops left. Low-level martialists were easy to find. Announcements were made throughout the entire territory to recruit ambitious martialists. However, it wasn't so easy to gather martialists above the Saint level. Especially Yuan Venerates. Apart from the Saber Array, there were still 8 Yuan Venerate battle arrays on standby in the Xianyuan royal family's lineup. This foundation was so strong that the two sides weren't on the same level. If Xianyuan Gaoyan gave the order to send all the Yuan Venerates into the battle array, it could be predicted that the 2 Wanxiu Union Yuan Venerate troops would be wiped out in an instant. How could everyone present not be nervous? After today's battle, the Wanxiu Union, which had regained its national title, had practically exhausted all its resources. Qin Hao chuckled inwardly when he saw everyone's nervous expressions. He naturally knew that the Wanxiu Union's military strength wasn't as good as the Xianyuan family's. However, since they had come, they still had to fight. They couldn't let Xiang Mo be idle. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come to embarrass themselves. Was there a need to worry about the 2 battle array members? There was no need. With the Sacred Palace disciples around, as long as Xianyuan Gaoyan didn't gather all the human rulers to deal with them, even the heavenly sound resonance of the Alcade Peak disciples wouldn't be able to pass, let alone 9 Yuan Venerate battle arrays. Su Jin was holding the line, so there was no need to worry about the battle at the front. At the moment, Qin Hao's attention was focused on Xianyuan Wuba and the other higher-ups, especially Xianyuan Wuying. Today, Qin Hao had come for him and Chang Hello. He had to personally wring Xianyuan Wuying's head. Chapter 1575. In the sky above the Imperial City, both sides sent out Yuan Venerate battle formations at the same time. The battle was getting more and more intense. The Xianyuan royal family's saber formation was originally responsible for exterminating the beast tide in the city. Suddenly, a beam of halberd radiance pierced through the sky and blasted the saber formation. The people within the formation were all shaken up and their movements were immediately hindered. "Exterminate them!" A Peak Yuan Venerate in charge of the saber formation shouted sternly as he looked at the halberd formation formed by Xiang Mo. All the members heard the command and simultaneously increased their source soul power to integrate it into the battle formation. The large formation resonated and erupted with a massive radiance. The figures within the formation were engulfed by the radiance and seemed to have disappeared entirely. What replaced it was a huge war blade that was shining coldly in the air. This war blade seemed to have condensed into a solid form. The power of every member was a part of this war blade. Surging saber chi burst forth as the war blade slashed down at Xiang Mo and the others. The void seemed to have been cut open as the saber light was incomparably sharp. Xiang Mo and the others didn't dare be careless. They all increased their soul power and a massive radiance engulfed everyone. It also seemed to have condensed into a substantial war halberd that lay across the sky. Then, its speed suddenly increased sharply as it whizzed forward and collided with the saber light that was slashing down. Clang! The sound of collisions reverberated in the air as the war halberd and the domineering saber slashed back and forth. The halberd light and the saber light intertwined, trying to shatter the other party and disintegrate the power of the people within the formation. Every time they clashed, someone in the formation would be injured. However, no one could do anything to the other for a while. When Xianyuan Gaoyan saw this, He waved his hand again and sent out a second Yuan Venerate battle formation to provide assistance. However, the Zheng clan was already prepared. The Yuan Venerate team, not far from Xiang Mo, immediately formed a formation. The formation light soared into the sky and intercepted them. Comparing teams? Xianyuan Gaoyan snorted. The Myriad Cultivator Alliance had yet to recover from the battle 3 years ago. There were only 2 Yuan Venerate battle formations left. How could they compare to him? He ordered, "Send out 2 more formations and exterminate them." Whoosh! At his command, 2 of the remaining 7 Yuan Venerate formations of the Xianyuan royal family broke away from the main army and transformed into a divine elephant and a giant axe as they charged into the battle. The divine elephant stomped down, causing the space to tremble. The 4 hooves of the elephant contained extremely overbearing weight of gravity. As the elephant stomped down, it crushed the halberd's head. Xiang Mo and the others felt as if the elephant's leg was crushing down on them like a mountain. Their bodies were bound by the gravity, and all the warriors in the matrix were unable to move for a while. It was at this moment that the tyrannical blade ruthlessly chopped down. Endless sharp light cut into the halberd, and a terrifying power invaded the array. Everyone's divine souls were impacted, and the soul power that was maintaining the array became unstable. With a cracking sound, dense cracks appeared on the halberd array, and it seemed like it would shatter at any moment. Dong! The divine elephant's 4 feet landed on the halberds. The great path of gravity of Xianyuan royal family pressed down in a frenzy, invading the halberd matrix once again. Xiang Mo and the others couldn't help but vomit blood at the same time, falling down one after another. From the outside, one could see a halberd falling from the sky to the ground. My grandson! Above the void outside the city, Xiang Bu, who was watching the battle, cried out in alarm. Being besieged by 2 Yuan Venerate battle formations of the Xianyuan royal family, this blow was definitely not light. Unfortunately, his side didn't have any extra forces to go and help. Even the second Yuan Venerate team, that had gone out with Xiang Mo, was besieged by the enemy and couldn't even fend for themselves. Qin Hao stood at the front of the warship and quietly observed the battle. Regardless of whether it was in terms of numbers or combat strength, the Zheng clan and the Xianyuan family weren't on par. It was normal for them to be suppressed. However, at this moment, he didn't say anything. This was because he didn't need to give any orders. Su Jin knew what to do. Whoosh! While Xiang Mo and the others were in trouble, the sound of a great path flute whizzed out from outside the city. The sound waves suffused with the radiance of laws enveloped the divine elephant and the blade array. The heavenly sound of the Yaoguang Peak disciples resonated with heaven and earth. The laws entered their souls and invaded the battle formations without any hindrance, rushing into the minds of every member of the Xianyuan royal family. In an instant, the image of the divine elephant and the light of the tyrant blade dissipated at the same time. The 2 teams were immediately exposed. Countless people were covering their ears with their hands. Their faces were distorted, and their eyes were bloodshot. They looked extremely pained. The sound of the flute entered their ears and invaded their souls. They felt as if their bodies were being crushed by the power of heaven and earth. The sound of the flute wanted to shatter their souls. The power was too strong, and they simply couldn't resist it. Kill! Xiang Mo seized the opportunity and raised his soul power once again. He ignored the injuries in his body and formed a halberd with the others to attack. The halberd turned back and shot straight into the sky. The sharp blade aura pierced through the formation of blades and the group of divine elephants. Suddenly, countless people's bodies were torn apart by the formation light. Blood splashed out like rain. Just one attack had destroyed 2 teams of the same level on the spot. It was obvious how strong the interference of the sound techniques released by Su Jin and the others were. Men, kill that flute master for me! Xianyuan Gaoyan shouted angrily as he pointed in Su Jin's direction. Su Jin's interference was too wide. The sound of the flute permeated the air and covered the entire city. Whenever the Jing clan showed signs of weakness, he would immediately use the music to forcefully interfere and turn the situation around. This person had to be eliminated as soon as possible. Otherwise, even if all the Yuan Venerate battle formations were mobilized, they would still be affected by the sound of the flute and their combat strength would be reduced. Kill! In the void, an elder behind Xianyuan Gaoyan moved. Emperor Light wreaked havoc around his body as he descended like a meteor. A giant palm of energy shot toward Su Jin. The young man playing the flute had a half-step Yuan Emperor cultivation base. He had formed an emperor's body and wasn't someone an ordinary human ruler could match. After all, he had snatched the Grand Elder Yuegong's Emperor Tribulation. Even Chang He had been defeated by him. Naturally, the Xianyuan family's emperor-level powerhouses had to be mobilized to successfully eliminate him. He's just a junior. Where's the dignity of the southern proud Emperor Xianyuan? Sword Emperor Makamanji said coldly to Xianyuan Gaoyan. Even an emperor-level elder had to be mobilized to kill a human ruler. I'm afraid that even your nephew Shou Wuk won't be a match for this person. Xianyuan Gaoyan retorted bluntly. Makamanji was mocking him? Which human ruler could snatch someone's emperor tribulation by force? That flute master clearly had the qualifications to become an emperor and had already seen through the emperor's path. He could probably summon the emperor tribulation at any time. If he didn't mobilize an emperor-level powerhouse, no one below the emperor level could be his match. This was a battlefield, not a friendly exchange between two factions. Xianyuan Gaoyan didn't care about Makamanji's mockery. It was fine as long as he could kill Su Jin. If it weren't for his dignity, he would have done it himself. Buzz. At that moment, the majestic palm of energy that pierced through the void crushed everything in its path. The dazzling light of rules lingered above, and the heavens trembled. It was as if this palm could bury the city below. Su Jin couldn't possibly block this attack. Fourth level Emperor level. Qin Hao looked up and transmitted his voice to someone behind him. Uncle Zheng. Zheng Qingqi's father nodded. Emperor Light flashed around him as he soared into the sky. In an instant, a huge soul ship formed under his feet. He drove the ship forward and shouted at the Xianyuan royal family elder, "Old man, don't be arrogant." The two emperors attacked, and their auras were like thunder. Soon, they collided fiercely. The soul ship and the palm were destroyed at the same time, and there was a deafening roar. The light of different rules swept out violently, and the two were sent flying into the distance at the same time. "You're quite powerful." Zheng Qingqi's father's legs were numb from the impact, and he stared at the elder opposite him. This elder's cultivation was 2 levels higher than his, and his soul power and primordial qi were denser. But for cultivators who could enter the Emperor realm, 2 levels wasn't a big difference. Even if they couldn't defeat the other party, they could at least hold him back and prevent the Xianyuan family cultivators from affecting the battle below the Emperor realm. Go again. Xianyuan Gaoyan waved his hand and gave a firm order. The flute master of the Jing clan must be killed. Whoosh, whoosh. Including the one who attacked before, there were a total of 9 emperors. Excluding Xianyuan Wuba and Xianyuan Wuying, all the emperors were mobilized. Elders of the Night Luo Palace, listen to my orders. Protect our juniors, and don't show mercy to anyone who attacked. Yininghong stepped on the 8-winged demon Oriole, and the Empress' radiance flickered as she gave the order. Good, very good. Xianyuan Gaoyan looked at Yininghong and squeezed out the words from between his teeth. She was willing to go against the Xianyuan family at all costs. Today, the Zheng clan is defeated, and the Night Luo Palace will completely disappear from the southern region. But I'm very curious, do you still have any emperors in your sect? As far as he knew, apart from the Night Demon Emperor's mount, the 8-winged demon Oriole, The strongest person in the Night Luo Palace was the former Grand Elder, a quasi-emperor. However, that great elder had already died in battle 3 years ago. Today, what could Yi Ninghong use to fight against the Xianyuan family? Yes or no, open your eyes wide and look carefully. Yi Ninghong said coldly. Not long ago, there was indeed no one in her sect who had entered the Emperor realm. Not a single one. However, ever since Qin Hao suddenly returned with Muri, 4 emperors were born in the Night Luo Palace overnight. Those 4 people were originally at the peak of the Emperor realm, but they had been stuck in their realm for many years. They had never comprehended their own Emperor realm and were unable to take that step forward. Although they relied on the secret technique of the Supreme Divinity Senior to forcefully raise their cultivation and jumped from the Emperor realm to the 3rd heaven of the Emperor realm. Moreover, there was no possibility of them improving their cultivation for the rest of their lives. This was the side effect of raising their cultivation base. However, for them, being able to enter the Emperor realm was their lifelong dream. As for becoming an Emperor Lord, the 4th elder had never thought about it. Moreover, the 4 of them were already old. If they still couldn't see through the Emperor realm, they wouldn't have many years left to live. Now that they suddenly became emperors, it was equivalent to extending their lifespan. Even if their cultivation base couldn't be improved and there was a trace of regret, their lives could already be considered perfect. Mortals cultivated martial arts, and many martial artists dreamed of becoming an emperor. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. While they were talking, on the battleship below, a group of figures flashing with emperor light rose into the air. Under Xianyuan Gaoyan's shocked expression, 4 white-haired old women blocked in front of Emperor Yuan of the Xianyuan family. At the same time, old ancestor Zheng waved his hand, and Emperor Yuan of the family rose up at the same time and joined Emperor Yuan of the Night Luo Palace. Including Jing Qingqi's father, there were a total of 8 people. 8 against 9. Although Emperor Yuan was at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, he still had the power to fight. How can this be? Xianyuan Gaoyan was shocked. Emperors. In addition to Yi Ninghong, other emperors were born in the Night Luo Palace. Was this considered a blessing from the heavenly Tao? Xianyuan Gaoyan couldn't figure out where the emperors of the Night Luo Palace came from. If they broke through at the last minute, why didn't the family's spies discover it? After all, breaking through to the Emperor realm would attract the Emperor Tribulation. However, during this period of time, the Emperor Tribulation didn't fall in the Night Luo Palace and the Zheng dynasty. Chapter 1576. Emperors had to go through the Emperor Tribulation and refine their bodies before they could become emperors. Otherwise, their bodies would not be able to support the rules of the Great Path and control the power of heaven and earth. Once they released their Tao will, they would suffer a backlash and die. If the Night Net Palace did not send down the Emperor Tribulation, how could they refine their bodies? No one could answer Xianyuan Gaoyan's question. Muri was a flawless great emperor, a 3rd realm emperor. It was easy for her to reverse the heaven and earth anomaly of a few early-stage emperors. Makamanji and the encompassing emperor looked down and saw the few emperors of the Night Net Palace. Their eyes flashed with surprise, but more than that, they were envious. Shou Wuk was Makamanji's nephew, and Luo Yuliang was the encompassing emperor's youngest son. They naturally knew some secrets that Xianyuan Gaoyan did not. For example, Miaoli was a super expert who had stepped into the 3rd realm of Emperor Tao. The power of a supreme god can forcefully break through the emperor's Tao and pull a primitive emperor into the emperor realm. Muyunzong's heart was in turmoil. Was the 3rd tier of the imperial path so powerful? He had proven his Tao and thought that he had reached the peak. However, Muri made him feel like he was looking at a mountain. It seemed that he still had a long way to go on the path of the Sword Tao. Or, after the battle was over, he could talk to the Supreme God and see if she could help him. At this moment, The encompassing emperor was gloating. He looked at Xianyuan Gaoyan. The Night Net Palace had produced 4 emperors out of nowhere. Including the Zheng clan, their emperors were enough to fight against him. There was no suspense in this battle. The Xianyuan family was doomed. The Emperor Xianyuan would die here. At this moment, the encompassing emperor's eyes flashed with ferocity. The resentment that had accumulated in his heart for many years seemed to be relieved. Xianyuan Gaoyan's death could comfort Yufei's soul in heaven. He had waited for this moment for too long. He also wanted to fight to the death with Nan Ao. However, the encompassing emperor did not expect Qin Hao to fulfill his wish and destroy the entire Xianyuan family. The encompassing emperor was impressed by the courage and determination of a junior, and felt that he was inferior. High up in the sky, the 17 great emperors from both sides faced each other in the air. Balls of golden-white emperor's light surged, causing the space to tremble. The destructive laws of the universe seemed to be able to cut the sky into countless pieces. Countless martial artists who came to watch the battle were shocked. It had been a long time since a battle between martial emperors had taken place in the southern region. Today, a life-and-death battle would take place in front of them. They didn't know how many Emperor Yuan would fall here, but they also felt that it was a pity. After all, no matter where he went in the continent, Emperor Yuan was definitely a powerful existence who was worshipped and revered by tens of thousands of people. Kill! Without any superfluous words, an elder of the Xianyuan clan roared. His palms formed a circle in the shape of a shield and weaved with the radiance of endless gravity. With a palm strike, the great path collapsed. The giant shield pressed down on Jingqingqi's father. The other emperors of the Xianyuan family also attacked one after another, each looking for an opponent. Everyone, be careful of one heart, Duanmu Qinghui shouted solemnly. His figure flickered, and with the platinum light emperor, he rushed toward the 2 patriarchs of the Southern Pride sect. Now, he had also entered the martial emperor realm, but he wasn't forcefully promoted by Muri. Instead, his Dao foundation was deep, and he took advantage of the situation to become a first-stage martial emperor. The 2 patriarchs of the sect were also first-stage martial emperors. Qing Lao blocked the 2 of them by himself. "Mr. Duanmu, get out of the way. We don't want to fight with you." One of them had white hair and a youthful face. He was dressed in tight-fitting clothes and was filled with the radiance of a sharp spear. Judging from his aura, he was obviously an martial emperor who was proficient in spear technique. "In this current situation, can I give way?" Qing Lao replied. If he gave way, the battle situation in the city would change drastically because of the intervention of the martial emperors. "I have no choice, sorry to offend you," another long-bearded man sighed. He suddenly clenched his fist. A platinum radiance spread, and his fists gradually petrified, turning into stone fists that looked incomparably hard. These 2 people weren't from the Xianyuan family. It was only because their sect was located in the Southern Pride sect that they had received guidance from Xianyuan Gaoyan that they had no choice but to get involved in the conflict. They didn't want to be enemies with Qing Lao. After all, Qing Lao wasn't a nobody in the Southern Pride region. His cultivation was strong, and he was the only alchemist who was close to Denda's level. Today, he finally got what he wanted and became Dendi. The 2 of them had long admired Qing Lao. If this battle didn't happen, they would have become good friends. "Gather space into stone." The long-bearded man grabbed at the air. He had to attack even if he didn't want to. Otherwise, Xianyuan Gaoyan wouldn't let them off. He reached out his stone palm and grabbed at Qing Lao. An invisible power of rules spread forward at an extremely fast speed. Everywhere it passed, the space condensed into stone. Huge stones continuously crashed toward Duanmu Qinghui. It was extremely domineering. "Break!" Qing Lao shouted. Dilly condensed in his palm. His palm glowing with platinum light slashed down. It was comparable to the sharpest weapon in the world. With one slash, countless huge stones were split from the center and flew to the sides. The long-bearded man shook his head. Even though Duanmu Qinghui had entered the Emperor realm, he was obviously lacking in experience in a battle of the Emperor realm. How could his rules be broken so easily? Condense. He gave the order. The Emperor's light around the long-bearded man's body swept out. The countless broken stones in the air were all controlled and rushed towards Elder Qing. They were like scales that covered Elder Qing's body. In an instant, he was sealed in the air and turned into a stone statue. Sorry, this is the only way to not harm your life. The long-bearded man looked at the white-haired Spear Emperor. Take advantage of the opportunity. Okay. The Spear Emperor nodded. He disappeared from his original position and turned into a dazzling spear light. It pierced through the void and landed in Su Jin's direction, wanting to kill him in one strike. However, Duanmu Qinghui, who had turned into a stone statue, disappeared at the same time. He suddenly appeared in the path of the spear light. The two sides collided. The power of the rule spear ruthlessly pierced the stone statue. There was a shocking explosion. Countless stones shot out in all directions. You don't want to live anymore? The long-bearded man's expression changed drastically. He was shocked. He had used the rules to seal Duanmu Qinghui because he didn't want the other party to interfere. However, Qing Lao still had the strength to move. He used his body to block the Spear Emperor's attack. When one's cultivation was sealed, one could imagine the consequences. Puff! Qing Lao vomited blood. It flowed on his chest. This spear pierced through his entire body. Even his spirit was injured by the rule of the spear. However, at the same time, this spear also disintegrated the rule of petrification on his body, freeing him from his imprisonment. I said, I can't let you go, Duanmu Qinghui said. Duanmu Qinghui said. Although the stone statue was destroyed, he was also injured by the rule spear will at the same time. In your current state you are no match for the two of us. Don't be stubborn. A trace of anger appeared on the long-bearded man's face. Even if he was not injured, Duanmu Qinghui could not possibly be a match for the two of them. Moreover, the petrification on Duanmu Qinghui's body was broken. However, his legs and hands were still sealed. Haha, you have underestimated the old man. Duanmu Qinghui's eyes suddenly glowed with imperial light. A powerful platinum light swept out from his body and spread to his limbs. The rocks that stuck to the surface of his body disappeared layer by layer. It was as if they were swallowed by the imperial light and rolled into his body. When the imperial light dissipated, Duanmu Qinghui was as good as new. There was no longer any rock blocking his body. This is the rule of refinement? The long-bearded man's eyes narrowed. His expression changed slightly. If we can't get past him, Xianyuan Gaoyan will not let us go. There is no need to hold back. The Spear Emperor gritted his teeth. He pointed into the void. A ray of imperial light turned into a divine spear of the Great Path. It pierced straight toward Qing Lao's chest. However, Qing Lao grabbed at the void. The power of the rule spewed forward and wrapped around the divine spear. The divine spear melted little by little. Before it even reached him, it had been completely refined. So difficult. You have to force my hand. The long-bearded man knew that he could not hold back any longer. Duanmu Qinghui's rule power was a little powerful. It could actually refine the power of the will of others. There was a loud roar in the void. The long-bearded man's body grew rapidly. Layers of rocks continued to accumulate on his body. He used the power of the rule power on himself and turned into a stone giant in the blink of an eye. A mountain-like fist smashed down. It shook the void and slammed heavily toward Duanmu Qinghui's head. Spear-breaking sun and moon. Seeing this, the Spear Emperor erupted with even more violent spear light. He pointed into the void again. Dilly condensed a divine spear that was hundreds of meters long. A terrible rule light lingered on it. His will drove the divine spear forward. Come down. Qing Lao let out a deep roar. He stretched out his palms, wanting to subdue the dragon and tiger. Majestic dilly spewed out from his palms, sealing the space around him. Then, he turned sideways and avoided the Stone Emperor's fists. However, dilly suddenly contracted. The space became narrow, firmly trapping the stone giant. If you let me go like this, both of us will suffer. The Stone Emperor looked at the hundreds of meters long divine spear flying toward him. He could not help but let out a panicked cry. His towering body struggled wildly. Even the space was cracked. If both of us suffer, so be it. I have no choice. Dense blue veins appeared on Qing Lao's forehead. He used all his cultivation to release Dilly, firmly trapping the Stone Emperor in front of him. The Rock Emperor flew into a rage and let out a bestial roar. He stomped down in the air, and the Emperor Qi in his body surged crazily like a vast ocean. With the naked eye, the space around him began to condense into rock. Strands of blood continued to flow from Duanmu Qinghui's mouth. The more the Stone Emperor struggled, the more serious the injuries he suffered from the invasion of the rules. He only felt that his vitality and soul power were flowing slower and slower. It was as if his meridians and internal organs had turned into dead objects. Even so, he did not retreat at all. Shurgondang, get out of the way. The Spear Emperor looked at the two people who were entangled and let out an anxious cry. Even he could not stop this full-strength spear. I also want to. Shurgondang replied with a sorrowful cry. Boom! The divine spear pierced through the void, and the great Tao of space collapsed. It first pierced the stone giant's body. At this moment, countless stone layers exploded, revealing the Stone Emperor's true body. At the same time, the spear light began to shrink rapidly. Under the backlash of the rules, it became normal size. However, the spear's momentum did not decrease. The sharp spear light continued to move forward, piercing through the Stone Emperor's body and piercing through his chest. It pierced into Qing Lao's body and flew out from his back. Then, the power of this spear completely disappeared. It turned into a tiny embroidery needle-like light and disappeared in the air. With a cry, the Stone Emperor and Qing Lao spat out blood at the same time. They trembled extremely violently. The light around their bodies was extinguished at the same time. Both of them fell into the city. Indeed, both sides were injured. Consider yourself unlucky. The Spear Emperor watched as the Stone Emperor fell. After being struck by his rule spear intent, even if he did not die, he would be severely injured. However, the Stone Emperor's sacrifice was not useless. At least he had pulled Duanmu Qinghui along with him. Now, no one was blocking him anymore. Die. The Spear Emperor swept his gaze down and stared viciously at Su Jin. After killing this flute master, his mission was completed. Even if he immediately withdrew from the battle, Xianyuan Gaoyan would no longer pursue his responsibility. Thinking of this, the Spear Emperor's body lit up again. Rule Dao intent lingered around his body. It looked like his body had turned into a peerless spear. His killing intent crazily enveloped downward. He turned around and wanted to kill Su Jin under his spear. However, for some reason, the soul power in his body suddenly stagnated. He was actually unable to maintain the operation of the rules. At this moment, the Spear Emperor was horrified to discover that his hands and feet were gradually being climbed up by the rock layer. It continued to spread throughout his body. Even his meridians and internal organs were petrified at the same time. In the end, his head was also swallowed by the rock layer. He turned into a stone statue and fell into the city. Along with this, a curse towards the Stone Emperor sounded in the air. Brother Shi, thank you. Somewhere in the city, the heavily injured Duanmu Qinghui lay on the ground. A bloody hole was pierced through his back by a spear. He looked at a long-bearded man who was lying on the ground not far away. The man's injuries were not lighter than his. In fact, they were even more serious. After all, the Stone Emperor had suffered more injuries from the Spear Emperor. However, Qing Lao knew that if the Stone Emperor had not deliberately gone easy on him, he would not have been able to transfer the refined rock layer to the Spear Emperor with his cultivation base that had just stepped into the Emperor realm. It's nothing. It's not worth mentioning. By the way, shouldn't you give me a pill to treat me first? The Stone Emperor revealed a silly smile. Then, the two of them laughed heartily at the same time. In the city where the war drums were like thunder, the laughter of the two heavily injured Emperor realm experts was incomparably weak. It was completely drowned out by the noise. Chapter 1577. On the battleship, Qin Hao observed the battle with high concentration. He saw all the confrontations at all levels, and his consciousness covered the entire battlefield. Naturally, he saw Duanmu Qinghui falling into the city with injuries after fighting two opponents alone. Qing Lao's aura has become very weak, but most of the nomological spear momentum was shared by Stone Emperor Yuan, so he should be fine. Duanmu Qinghui cultivated alchemy and knew how to quickly deal with his injuries. Qin Hao wasn't worried about this. On the other hand, Emperor Yuan, who was good at petrifying nomological laws, seemed to have held back many times during the confrontation. Otherwise, it would be difficult for Duanmu Qinghui to refine the other party's nomological laws so quickly. Stone Emperor didn't use too much strength. Qin Hao smiled. After all, he wasn't a member of the Xianyuan family. Stone Emperor's approach was very smart. He not only protected himself but also didn't destroy the advantage that the Zheng dynasty had obtained. Moreover, Xianyuan Gaoyan couldn't find fault with him. How could he be blamed for being injured in the confrontation and being unable to fight again? Now that three emperors had left the battle, Nan Ao no longer had the advantage of numbers. Of course, in terms of combat power, the emperors of the Zheng clan and Night Net Palace were weaker. In particular, the four elders of Night Net Palace were forcibly promoted by Senior Sister. They were even weaker than the normal Emperor Yuan. They were completely at a disadvantage in the battle. But this disadvantage was only temporary. Qin Hao still had three other emperors who hadn't shown up yet. They were his trump cards. The purpose was to prevent Xianyuan Gaoyan's backup plan. The Xianyuan family had a strong foundation and had operated Nan Ao for thousands of years. Who knew if the emperors that appeared on the surface weren't all of them? Qin Hao had to be on guard. At this moment, although Emperor Yuan of the Zheng clan was at a disadvantage, they could still hold on and wouldn't be defeated by the other party for a while. As long as they firmly delayed the other party, the Zheng clan would definitely win this battle. Qin Hao glanced at the Venerate battlefield. Just as he had expected, Su Jin was leading the Yaoguang Peak disciples to execute the Sky Sound Resonance. Even though the Zheng clan only had 2 Yuan Venerate teams, these 2 teams had the support of the half-step Yuan Emperor's sound technique. Basically, no opponent could match up to them. No matter how many Yuan Venerate battle formations the Xianyuan family had, it would be futile and useless. Once the Yuan Venerate battle formation stepped forward to stop them, it would only add to the pile of corpses. Emperor Yuan was obstructed, the Yuan Venerate battle formations were suppressed, and the Saint Army was caught in a fierce battle. The situation in the imperial city was getting worse and worse. Humph, trash. Xianyuan Gaoyan's gaze was cold as he watched the Stone Emperor fall from the sky. Shi Gondan had been in the monarch realm for many years. His petrification Dao will had reached the point of perfection. However, he was careless and was trapped by Duanmu Qinghui's rules. He was truly incompetent. Spear the Arch was even more foolish. He did not even know that someone had refined the laws into his body. Had his brain been eaten by a pig? However, even without the two of them, the Xianyuan clan still had the upper hand in the battle of great emperors. However, such an outcome was far from satisfying Xianyuan Gaoyan. He did not want to gain the upper hand, but to crush them. He wanted to kill the Jing clan's emperor and the madam's wife of the Night Net Palace to turn the tide of the battle. Now, even though he had the upper hand, he couldn't break through the other party's blockade and help the city. Xianyuan Gaoyan's face turned paler and paler. The situation had deviated from his expectations. "I'll go." A burly figure stepped out. His square face was filled with domineering might. Xianyuan Wuba, who had inherited Xianyuan Gaoyan's bravery, volunteered to fight. "Bar, don't be careless. Remember, you are the crown prince, the next emperor Xianyuan," Xianyuan Gaoyan instructed. Xianyuan Gaoyan could only let Xianyuan Wuba fight now. Moreover, he was very confident in Xianyuan Wuba's cultivation. "Okay." Xianyuan Wuba nodded and raised his thick eyebrows. Dazzling emperor's light surged around his body as he swooped down like a domineering dragon king. Then, he threw a heavy punch that contained vigorous rules of order at a Jing clan elder. That Jing clan elder was a second-tier monarch and was not a match for the Xianyuan clan elder. At this moment, he was forced to retreat. Suddenly, he heard a rumbling sound above his head. He looked up and his expression changed drastically. Xianyuan Wuba, the crown prince of the proud south, the successor of Emperor Xianyuan. A fierce fist smashed down. The fist aura pierced through the void. The great Tao of gravity bombarded, shattering countless space. The sky seemed to be crushed by the fist aura. It was not something that this Jing clan elder could contend against. Sixth-tier monarch Yuan, my life is over. The Jing clan elder said sadly. The opponent in front of him was a fourth-tier monarch Yuan. If they continued fighting, he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Suddenly, Xianyuan Wuba, a battle maniac, appeared. How could he survive in this situation? This battle was dangerous. Before they set off, everyone knew that someone might die. But they didn't expect that the first person to die would be him. Boom! An ear-shattering sound of a huge wave exploded above their heads. Its power was extremely terrifying. The aftermath of the platinum wave swept down, sending the Zheng clan's elder and emperor Yuan of the Xianyuan family flying more than 1,000 feet away. A huge soul ship shuttled through the void. At the front of the soul ship stood a white-bearded old man in battle armor. This old man was the old patriarch of the Zheng clan, Zheng Qingqi's grandfather. Xianyuan Wuba made a move. He naturally couldn't watch his family's emperor Yuan get slaughtered. He urged the soul ship to enter the array and blocked the attack. However, when the soul ship came into contact with the fist aura, a mouthful of old blood spurted out. Old ancestor Jing somersaulted dozens of times in the air before he could barely stabilize his body. His body was in turmoil. "Big brother!" The Jing clan elder who escaped the calamity shouted. "Focus on the battle. Xianyuan Wuba's opponent is me." Old ancestor Jing stepped in the air. A mass of platinum light condensed into a soul ship and gathered at the bottom of his feet again. Endless light flowed, enveloping him and the soul ship together. His aura was greatly boosted. "Are you worthy?" Xianyuan Wuba looked down on old ancestor Jing condescendingly. Third-order Emperor Yuan, 3 levels lower than him. Looking for death? Again. Old ancestor Jing was old but strong. He urged the soul ship under his feet and rushed up to the sky. A Jiuquan royal saber was drawn from his waist and slashed 3 huge saber lights at Xianyuan Wuba's face. The saber lights flew fiercely and turned into a 3-headed warship midway. Using the void as a sea, it rode the wind and broke the wave. When it was wrapped in the might of the great Tao that conquered the 4 seas, it majestically blasted towards Xianyuan Wuba. "Let's see how many punches you can take." Xianyuan Wuba shouted as he pointed his 5 fingers downwards. The universe changed color, and endless airflow surged, twisting the space. A vortex that covered the sky was formed, swallowing the three-headed soul ship. The vortex flickered with terrifying gravity rules. Bang! Boom! Boom! The vortex strangled and sucked in the soul ship. It was directly crushed by the gravity laws. Then, it covered old ancestor Zheng's head and swallowed him together. Cough cough, Brother Qin, I'm afraid my grandfather won't be able to hold on for long. Jing Qinqi looked at the battle and said, Old Master Zheng has my second senior brother's Emperor Rui Rainbow Silk. Are you still afraid? Qin Hao looked at Jing Qinqi calmly and smiled. He also learned from senior sister Muri that the Emperor Red Silk, wrapped around Zhang Yu's body, was originally called the Rui Rainbow Silk. It was a mid-grade Emperor Level 9th Forge ritual implement produced by Xiantian Peak. It was extremely powerful. Originally, the Emperor Red Silk wrapped around Zhang Yu's waist was an inconspicuous gray hemp rope. However, this item had a spirit and could change according to its owner's will. When it fell into the hands of different people, it would become a different weapon. If it recognized Shou Wuk as its master, it could become a sword. After the Divine Palace was destroyed, although Zhang Yu and Eastern Sky died, only a trace of obsession was left. However, the Emperor weapon that they had when they were alive really existed. Later, when she heard the tone of senior sister Muri's explanation, even she was a little envious of Qin Hao. This Emperor Red Silk was something that Zhang Yu had obtained by luck. The previous generation's 12 chief disciples were similar to how Qin Hao and the others chose their Emperor weapons at Xiantian Peak. The Emperor weapons were stored in different boxes. Because everyone's cultivation was high enough, they easily subdued the weapon spirits. Chang Yu, on the other hand, had chosen the most powerful one among them. Second senior brother. At the mention of this name, Qin Hao couldn't help but secretly clench his fist. A heavy weight weighed down on his heart. That's right. Old Master can't use the Emperor Red Silk, but with it wrapped around his body, it won't be that easy to break through. Jing Qinqi saw the change in Qin Hao's expression and said no more. Was he worried? Of course he was. Although the Emperor Red Silk was powerful, it recognized Qin Hao as its master. The Patriarch couldn't use its power. At present, he could only hope that the battle would progress quickly. Once Xianyuan Gaoyan was forced to use his hidden trump card, he would be able to do whatever he wanted without holding back. Boom! A muffled sound came from the sky. Everyone looked up and saw that the huge vortex shrouding the sky had shrunk into a ball, producing a strong explosion. Endless gravity law swept out, causing the sky to tremble. Everyone was worried for Patriarch Zheng. However, after the high air waves disappeared, the old figure in armor was still standing majestically. Another mouthful of blood spurted out. Looking at the remaining half of the Emperor's sword in his hand and the intact Emperor Red Silk wrapped around his body, Patriarch Zheng thought to himself that there was no comparison. After withstanding Xianyuan Wuba's attack, the Emperor's sword that had accompanied him for many years was broken. However, there wasn't even a trace of the Emperor Red Silk left behind. It was really a good treasure. However, although the Emperor Red Silk offset the gravity law, the impact of the explosion still blasted on his body. Patriarch Zheng didn't feel good at all. You're fine. Xianyuan Wuba was slightly shocked. The attack just now used 80% of his strength, and it contained the purest power of the Xianyuan royal family's bloodline. Even a fifth-stage Emperor Yuan wouldn't just spit out a mouthful of blood. There must be a powerful protective treasure hidden on the old man's body. Xianyuan Wuba quickly thought of this. Again. Patriarch Zheng raised his head and puffed out his chest. The Earth Soul ship under his feet flickered with light as he rushed toward Xianyuan Wuba again. Although it was a little painful, it wouldn't kill him anyway. You old bastard! Xianyuan Wuba roared. The raging golden-white Emperor light seemed to have crushed the Tao around him. He punched out with both fists and smashed toward Patriarch Zheng's head. Damn it! Xianyuan Gaoyan clenched his teeth slightly. He was obviously a little anxious. He didn't expect Xianyuan Wuba to be unable to break through the defense of the Zheng clan's emperor stage. However, the casualties in the city were getting more and more serious. The lethality of the beast tide was great. Half of the city fell into the hands of the Zheng clan's soldiers. Currently, the Xianyuan royal family was about to retreat to the floating palace. If they couldn't get help soon, once the Zheng clan's soldiers invaded the imperial harem, the direct family members would be completely exposed to the enemy's blade. Looking at the jade buildings and palaces collapsing one after another, the majestic imperial city was filled with smoke. This city had been run by the family for thousands of years. It symbolized the supreme dignity of the Xianyuan royal family. It was intolerable. It was simply unbearable. Xianyuan Gaoyan hated the people of the spirit beast sect to death. He shouted, "Renhuang battle formation!" This shout shook the 9 heavens and came from the sky. It was as if a divine might had descended, and everyone's eardrums were about to be torn apart. Finally, you can't help but show yourself? Qin Hao looked at the other side of the void. At the front of the countless Renhuangs stood one person. It was Xianyuan Wuying. Chapter 1578. The most obvious difference between a first-rate sect and an overlord force was Emperor Yuan. The Emperor realm was a great threat to a first-rate sect, but the number of people was limited, and they were easily restrained by forces of the same level. As for the martial artists below the venerable realm, although there were many of them, they couldn't change the overall situation. The one who really affected the situation was still the primitive emperor. If Xianyuan Gaoyan wanted to reverse the situation in the city, he had to mobilize the Renhuangs. There was no other way at the moment. Kill. Brilliance flowed around Xianyuan Wuying's body and gathered into a set of armor. This second prince of southern pride was the commander of the Renhuang army, commanding all the Renhuang powerhouses. At this moment, above the void, there were a total of 5 Renhuang armies in southern pride. 2 of the Xianyuan royal family's battle formations were formed by the direct descendants of the Xianyuan royal family, and the other 3 teams were formed by the powerhouses of the various sects within the territory. Each team had more than 400 people, and a total of more than 2,000 Renhuang powerhouses were thrown into the battlefield. The scale was vast. Layer after layer of Renhuang light shrouded the sky, filling the world. Suddenly, it pressed down from the sky, and the aura made the martial artists in the city tremble like ants, not daring to move. Sure enough, there is no emperor. Qin Hao finally relaxed a little and transmitted a message behind him. Everyone gather. Everyone was waiting for this moment. They walked out of the divine palace, and this was their first battle. On the surface, it was to help Qin Hao, but wasn't it also a test for themselves? To see how well they had honed their martial arts in the past 3 years? Of course, after this battle, everyone would part ways and return to their respective clans. Screech! A peacock god's cry resounded through the sky. Qin Hao took the lead, stepping on the rainbow cloud sparrow, and rushed towards the 5 Renhuang battle formations of southern pride. At this moment, the Renhuang light flowed around his body, and his aura was extremely strong, making him look like a celestial sage. Behind Qin Hao, the disciples of the 7 peaks followed closely. After a short rest, the disciples of the Taiwei Peak recovered some soul power and also participated in the battle. The silhouettes of Renhuangs streaked across the sky and gathered closely together. At this moment, Mizang Peak's Lei Jiao, Hai Sha, and the others had the most ferocious offensive power and were at the front of the battle formation. Daozong Peak's Yishuehan, Chen Wanqin, and the others surrounded the 2 sides of the formation. The disciples of Taiwei Peak and Uni Peak were in the middle, providing the source of the formation's power. Xiaogua, Gu Kuei, and the other Xiantian Peak disciples were at the back. Everyone in this Renhuang battle matrix had an extraordinary temperament, and their talents were close to demonic. When they were combined, there was almost no weakness to be found. Amongst the numerous peerlessly graceful figures, the most striking was naturally Qin Hao, and he was like a peacock emperor that flew through the sky with a majestic aura. His vast spiritual power permeated and resonated with the battle matrix, connecting every disciple of the divine palace. Everyone's minds merged, and a layer of divine light covered everyone, swallowing them all up. The whole body turned into a peacock divine bird, with colorful light lingering around its huge body, all the way to Xianyuan Wuying's battle matrix. Behind the peacock divine bird, there was another battle matrix of Renhuang following. It was made up of the Jing tribe and the Night Luo Palace. They transformed into the black tortoise divine turtle battle matrix and climbed up. On the wide tortoise shell, coiled vipers opened their huge mouths and flicked their tongues, constantly making loud noises. The two battle matrices were full of momentum. Go and join up with Brother Qin and the others. I can handle it here. Su Jin looked up. The members of the Divine Palace had taken action, and the Yaoguang Peak naturally had to return. Su Jin, be careful, a disciple of the Yaoguang Peak said. A disciple from the Alcade Peak said. Immediately after, the crowd dispersed the resonance of the heavenly notes and turned into streams of light, flying towards the divine peacock in the void. Their speed was extremely fast, like tiny halos, constantly merging into the divine peacock's body. Suddenly, the pressure released by the huge peacock divine bird became even stronger, and the cry it made was like a real ancient divine bird. Xianyuan Wuying. Qin Hao's roar came out from the mouth of the peacock divine bird. The sound waves moved forward like a raging hurricane that shook the void and blasted toward the Renhuang battle matrix of the Southern Ao sect. The three battle matrices of the Southern Ao sect at the front were impacted by the sound waves, and the rhythm seemed to be sucked into the matrix to destroy them. They couldn't help but release the light of the matrix at the same time, which stabilized the matrix. Even so, they were shaken back hundreds of meters by this roar. It was the same battle matrix of Renhuang, but the disciples of the Divine Palace were united as a whole. With a roar, they had shaken back three opponents, which was enough to show how powerful their cultivation was. You're ruining my business. You're courting death. Xianyuan Wuying recognized the owner of the voice. He would recognize the murderer of his son even if he turned into a ghost. Whoosh! The dazzling light of the matrix was released, and the army of Renhuang led by Xianyuan Wuying instantly turned into a golden dragon. The dragon's body was hundreds of meters long, and it roared into the sky like a divine dragon that had suppressed the ages. It ordered the battle matrix of the Renhuang of the Southern Ao sect, kill him. As the voice fell, the golden dragon moved at the same time. The dragon's body wriggled and twisted, and the heavens were shaking. The sharp dragon claws stepped down and clasped the head of the peacock divine bird. At the same time, two of the battle matrices formed by the Renhuang of the Southern Ao sect attacked together. The light of the sword soared into the sky, and a divine sword was full of the sword might of the great path. The cold light pierced the void and spewed out hundreds of meters, stabbing toward the abdomen of the divine bird. Roar! The roar of a tiger spread, and the other battle matrix was a flaming tiger with wings on its back. It was surrounded by flames, and its giant paws slapped down at the same time. Since they were enemies, there was no need to talk about fairness with the Zheng clan. Xianyuan Wuying wanted to destroy the divine bird, and the Renhuang of the Southern Ao sect would cooperate fully. The three battle matrices charged in a triangular formation. The sword and the tiger were in front, and the dragon was behind. The aura that converged was extremely terrifying. It was as if they had condensed into a new whole, forming a battle matrix outside the battle matrix. At this moment, even an upper-level Yuan emperor would have to hide in the face of such a battle. However, Qin Hao didn't need to hide. He urged the peacock matrix to go against the flow. Its huge wings spread out, setting off a violent airflow that cut through the space and swept toward the flaming tiger. At this moment, in the sky above Xianyuan Imperial City, Qin Hao's voice sounded, "Kill." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.